We're going to call this meeting to order. I
Bye.
appreciate everyone coming tonight. Real quick, the public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they need to fill out a form found in the lobby, and they will get 4 minutes to speak during the community comment section. Introduce the folks up here at the table with me. We have Superintendent Degner, Directors Pilcher Hayek, Eastham, Williams, to my left, Clausen, God, I'm really struggling. Finch, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to recognize the passing of Christine Grant. When I read some of the articles about Dr. Grant, she was described as a pioneer of gender equity in sports. I would also add that she was an advocate and a champion, not only for gender equity, but also for education, because she was, first of all, a teacher. She's been quoted as saying that having a school in our district named after her was one of her greatest honors, and the truth is the honor is all ours. Our community lost a legend in the passing of Dr. Grant, but her legacy will continue for years to come as students learn about the namesake of Christine Grant Elementary. So thank you, Dr. Grant. You will be missed. With that, we can move into our agenda, and the first item on our agenda is our all-state music reception, which I really love, and I think we're going to lead off with John Welch, who's going to introduce everybody.
Hi. Guess I'm doing it from over here this year. So,
All right.
hi everybody. My name is John Welch. I am the performance music coordinator for the district, and I'm also the orchestra director at West High. So just a couple of words here. I'm here tonight to present the students of the Iowa City Schools that have been selected to participate in the 2021 Iowa High School Music Association's All-State Band, Chorus, and Orchestra. This organization represents the nearly 300 high schools from across the state, and the students that are selected to these ensembles represent the finest high school musicians in Iowa. The students you see tonight have spent countless hours of practice in preparation for the festival that was held on November 20th in Ames. These students traveled to Iowa State University for 2 days of rehearsal, followed by a concert with all three ensembles playing to a packed house at Iowa State's Hilton Coliseum. The Iowa City Schools has nearly 200 students audition to participate in the all-state ensembles each year. And from that, this year, I'm proud to say that we had 84 students selected and 7 alternates also selected. This is by far the largest number of students selected to be all-staters in any district across the state. Before we introduce these students, I want to say that as the performance music coordinator, it is an honor to represent my colleagues from across the district and outstanding work that they do. And on behalf of them, I just want to say a couple of thank yous. First off, thank you to the district and the Music Auxiliary for financing the registration, hotel, and transportation expenses for this weekend. Also want to say thank you to the Iowa City Community School District and to the board for their continued support of our performance music programs. Your commitment to these curricular programs is a commitment to the arts both in our schools and in our community. Though tonight we celebrate just a small selection of our students, we continue to work to provide access to our programs to all students in the Iowa City Schools. Please remember that our programs remain central to a well-rounded education, while they also support the social and emotional well-being of our entire school community. Music education is needed more now than ever. And perhaps most of all, thank you to our parents and thank you to our students. The accomplishments here ultimately come back to our parents, to the support of your child's music education. And thank you to all that you do for our performance music programs here at the Iowa City Schools. And just if I can say, just kind of off the cuff, something I didn't write down and occurred to me. You know, the past 2 years have been incredibly difficult for all of us. And, you know, tonight is a moment of celebration. And I know that the school board has had to make a number of tough decisions over these past 2 years. And oftentimes, you all have been put through a very critical lens. But I just want to say, as a teacher, and then also as the coordinator, just in front of the entire community, in front of the public, I can't tell you how much, like, the majority of these folks that have, like, just looking at all these different faces and every single person you see here, how much work has gone to make sure that our students have had the opportunity to continue to play, whether it's been through helping us with ESSER funds and the amount of money that has been spent to ensure that our students have access to mask, special PPE for instruments, and just all the work that you have done and let us just kind of take over and like give feedback on to keep the kids safe and to allow us to do everything that we've done. I just cannot thank you enough. I know that there are many programs and we have many colleagues from other schools and other districts that are just fighting to survive. And at this point, you know, we've taken our lumps just as much as anyone. But again, the strength of these programs is due to the continued investment here. And I think you'll see tonight that we're thriving. With that said, we did have a number of conflicts with some of the students this evening, with this being just a little bit, 2 months almost after the All-State Ensemble. So you'll see the names. You might not see all the bodies, but we still got as many of them here as we could. So with that being said, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I know that I say that on behalf of all the teachers. Thank you for all that you've done. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to do this in order. I believe that we're going to start with all-state bands, and that would be City High Band and their directors, Michael Coble and Aaron Ottmar. So they'll bring their students out.
Hi, I just wanted to say my name is Mike Coble, the Assistant Director of Bands at City High School. And before I introduced our students, I just want to say thank you to you as well. Just reiterate what John said for supporting the arts. In an arts town, your support of the arts is essential. And I also wanted to just say thank you to our principal, John Bacon. I don't know if he's here tonight, but he is a champion for the arts at City High. And our program holistically would not be where it is without his awesome support. So just wanted to say that while we're here tonight. So I'll introduce our students, our excellent students that went to All-State this year for the band. The first being Matisse Arnone on horn, Manny Kane on bari sax, Olivia Lehman couldn't be here tonight, but she's on bass clarinet, Marcus Miller on trombone, also could not be here tonight, Molly Reapy on flute, Monique Schneblin on oboe, Ella Sherlock on bassoon, couldn't be here tonight, and Nick Thiedens on alto saxophone. Those are your City High Band All-Staters. Thank you all.
Okay, next we're going to do Liberty High Band and directors Ryan Arp and Nick Carlo, and I think Ryan Arp has come to the stand.
Hello, and thank you so much for this opportunity to recognize our students at this event. And thank you to John Welch for all the work that he did, making all of the organization and everything for this music department and the district work. So Liberty All-Staters from, wow, Liberty. Here we go. Luke Gage on clarinet. Awesome. Victoria Akis on bass clarinet. Jennifer Ho on clarinet. Brody Schoen on trombone. And students who are unable to make it, Grace Walker on French horn, Tyson Baker on tuba, and we had Ella Gilbert on alto saxophone. The Liberty All-Staters.
Okay, and next we'll have West High Band and the directors Rob Med and Rich Med. Rob Med.
I'm Rob Med, director at West High. Thank you very much for your support of our programs throughout the district. We really appreciate it. And we, as John mentioned, we do have a rehearsal going on this evening, so we have a number of students who are not here, and also a number of lessons and things. So the two students that I have here, I have Gary Chen on clarinet, and Claire Hahn on oboe and English horn. Just come right here, guys. Other students, West High Band All-Staters, Bhavansh Thresta on flute, Sophia Wang on flute, Ann Wu, also a flute player, Jonathan Chen on oboe, Miles Davies on clarinet, Heidi Du on clarinet, Florence Hiyu on clarinet, Claire Lawler on clarinet, Alex Yao on clarinet, Tony Wang on clarinet, and Nathan Way on clarinet, who is a 4-year All-Stater, which is quite an accomplishment. Damian Kim on tenor sax, Kyle Chi on trumpet, Ava Garcia on trumpet, Noah Hahn on trumpet, Sachiko Goto, trumpet alternate, and Audrey Parrish, and also a trumpet alternate. And those are your West High School Band All-Staters. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to our choirs now. So we'll start with City High Choir and their directors Tyler Hagee and Matthew Walker. And I think Tyler is going to come up.
Good evening. My name is Tyler Hagee, Director of Choirs at City High, and I just want to add my thanks to you and to our wider community for your support of the arts and for your advocacy for our programs, especially through this very, very difficult time that we've all been living in. We had 4 students who represented City High in the All-State Chorus: Sarah Brenneman, Whit Jury, Jared Moninger, who could not be here tonight, and Jake Roth, who also could not be here tonight.
Okay, and Liberty High Choir is next. Their directors Rob Williams and Caitlin Branneman. Both are unable to be here tonight, so Liberty High band director Ryan Arp is going to say the names for them.
Awesome. Choir students from Liberty High School accepted to All-State: Tatum Calderwood, Addie Sittig, Ashley Gallagher, Elena Schmidt, Macy Kazmerzak, Dylan Eyestone, Adam Schultz, Sonia Blazer, Deucalion Martin, Connor Ahrens, and Blake Gordley, the Liberty All-State Choir members.
And West High Choir, directors David Haas and Luigi Enriquez. Both of them are unable to be here tonight. I think both City and Liberty had rehearsals, so they are working, I promise. So I'll go ahead and do the names for them on behalf of West High. We had Samantha Krakow, Miranda Fang, Gwen Gonzalez, who was here, Sean Kwok, and Caitlin Schmidt-Rundell. And that is the West Side Choirs. Thank you. And to Orchestra, and we'll move on to City High Orchestra and their director, Megan Stuckey-Swanson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Stuckey-Swanson, and I teach orchestra at City High. And we have 12 All-Staters from our orchestra: Adrian Bostian, Isaac Bullwinkle, Marina Escandel, William Hand, Ruth Meehan, Keiko Radley, Lucas Ralston, Claire Sauter, Kalia Seaton, Greta Stanier, Kent Zidane, and Adam Zeithamel. And Kent Zidane and Ruth Meehan are our 4-year All-Staters, which is an amazing accomplishment.
Okay, in Liberty High Orchestra and their director, Annie Savage. Annie is unable to be here tonight, and I think their student is also unable to be here, but we'll acknowledge her anyway. And their All-State student is Anya Rumping on bass. And then last is the West High Orchestra, and I'm the director, John Welch, so we'll go ahead and through this. Peter Adams on bass, Nathan Chen, violin, Andrew Chen, violin, Maya Chu, violin, Andrew Dong, violin, Sabrina Du, violin, Liam Edberg, violin, and Liam was also a 4-year member, Jonathan Fahn, Hana Kitsumoto, violin. Jesse Lee, violin. Anya Lode, violin. Caroline Moscardo, violin. Aiden Ohl, viola. Esther Park was a violin alternate. Yuning Shao, violin. Emily Shen, viola, was also a 4-year member. Jaden Shin, cello. Anna Song, violin. Elizabeth Wan, cello, also a 4-year member. Haram Wu, viola. Helen Zhang, viola. Flora Zhu, violin. And Xiaoyi Zhu, viola. And this is the West High Orchestra, all state members. Again, on behalf of all the performance music faculty, thank you all so much, and thanks for letting us be here to acknowledge these students. Thanks.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is our student representative update. And first up on my list is City High.
Hi everybody, my name is Rebecca. I'm a co-class president at City High. Our update tonight, the Iowa High School mock trial case has been released and our mock trial teams are already hard at work. Coach Williams is excited. Our show choirs are very excited to be attending their first competition in 2 years at Linn-Mar this weekend. Students are planning to hold a voter registration drive on January 28th in partnership with Liberty High School at the doubleheader basketball game. Robotics took second place at a large competition this week, and our wrestlers, men and women, beat West in the annual crosstown match. Women's basketball is doing incredible, and they are ranked number 2 in the state. A student senate update for you. We are planning our winter dance. We're continuing our weekly Tampon Tuesdays, and we are planning to hold a TEDx event in the coming months. And this will be an opportunity for students and staff members at City to give their own TED Talks with a chance to be on TED's YouTube channel. So that's pretty cool. Students are now selecting sessions for our upcoming Mlk Day of Learning, which is happening on January 20th. And we just received approval on our composting plan, which is to have composting bins in our lunchroom to cut down on food waste. So Environmental and Gardening Club is working to make City High more environmentally friendly. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, Liberty High.
Good evening. My name is Beatrice Caskey. Tyler couldn't make it tonight, but I'm here to represent Liberty High School. We just returned from winter break, but we're already super busy. Tonight is senior night for our combined West and Liberty boys swim team. We're super proud of all the work they put in over these past 4 years to contribute to the building of this amazing program. They're ranked number 2 and they're hosting number 4 Linn-Mar this evening. Our boys basketball team is also hosting Western Dubuque tonight, so lots of sports going on. And then back in the school building, we're already busy with many club activities. Yesterday, our Students for Environmental Action Group started our recycling initiative in the lunchroom. They're collecting recyclable materials during all lunch programs and are using this program to promote sustainability and service at Liberty. For more service projects, right before winter break, our Student Senate hosted a collection drive at the Cross Park Hy-Vee in North Liberty. They collected a ton of items to keep our personal Liberty High community pantry as well as the North Liberty community pantry stocked throughout the winter season. We are also looking forward to our Day of Learning in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King next Thursday. Students are selecting sessions to go to with guest speakers and mini service opportunities. This past week, Liberty was also honored with the opportunity to host the first COVID-19 testing location for the district in our west parking lot. The student body has been very excited about learning about this, and the accessibility to testing has been very appreciative of our community. Also last week, our jazz choir was able to go to the Jazz Education Network National Conference in Dallas. They're one of 2 high schools selected for vocal jazz performance, and we're able to learn a lot from local peers and other jazz musicians in the conference. They enjoyed a fun week with lots of performances and educational opportunities, including the JFK Memorial and Dallas Art Museum. Continuing their performance streak, the band that accompanied them will be headed to Cedar Rapids tomorrow in order to record a song with Professor Jim Deere from the University of Iowa. So our return back to school for 2022 has been exciting already, and we're focused on a lot of service opportunities throughout the spring. Thank you for your continued support, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Next up, Tate High.
Hi everybody, my name is Sky Lowe, student representative of Tate High School, and I just want to start off by saying I hope everybody had a wonderful winter break. And speaking of winter and the holidays, our holiday store was amazing this year. So many students came in, got gifts for family members, friends, and even themselves. I cannot tell you guys how many people I saw come in just because they wanted a snack, which, you know. And a lot of the student council members loved wrapping the gifts for everybody. It not only made us feel good that we were helping other people, but yeah. And for Martin Luther King Day, since we can't be there that day, as soon as we get back, we are going to the film scene to watch John Lewis, Good Trouble. And when we return, Caleb Rainey, also known as the Negro Artist, will be working with our students in interactive program. We are looking forward to this day very much, not only because it is a very historical day, but also because it's also a day for a lot of students to learn about their past and learn about what's happened. And we're having an upcoming basketball game, and a lot of students are out due to illness, or maybe they're practicing social distancing. And that's all. I hope everybody has a great evening.
All right, thank you very much. Last but not least, West High.
Hi, I'm Advika, the board representative for West High School. I will begin where I want to begin with the debate team's accomplishments this weekend. Our West High debate team placed first in the state 2 years in a row, and we got some big trophies and wins this weekend. We are having our first show choir competition this weekend, just like City and Liberty. So it is their first in-person competition in 2 years, so we wish them luck. The Kirkwood Regional Center at the University of Iowa will be hosting informational Zoom sessions over the next few months to help West High students and parents on opportunities on how to take courses through Kirkwood. Our parent-teacher conferences are scheduled for next Wednesday, and students are unfortunately not looking forward to them. Our student-produced innovative theater is scheduled to have performances on the 13th and 14th of this month, so tomorrow and the day after. And now moving on to sports, the West High School swim team is having their senior night today for the boys, and they have achieved big wins this week in Waterloo and Cedar Fall. The girls basketball is back on track this season with their win at Linn-Mar, and the West High School boys basketball team has made a debut in the Associated Press poll. Our wrestling teams took on City High last week, and our West High boys and girls teams were hosted there. And finally, the West High School wrestling boys team finished 5th place at the Red Owens Holiday Invite. And the IFCA announced the academic all-state teams for this year. Thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that we have your continued support as West High continues to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next up we have our ICEA update. Brady Shutt.
Thank you, Brady Shutt, President of ICEA, President Isone, Superintendent Degner, directors. I'd like to first start just by saying thank you, for your continued support. You look at our legislative priorities that are in our board document, and they're fantastic, as they always are. And obviously, a lot of us have been following the opening of the legislative session in Des Moines and some of the comments that were made. And I know that all of us in this room really stand strong with public educators and public education. And I'm just very, appreciative of your continued support, and urge legislators and community members to engage in positive discourse. We have a lot of challenges, obviously, facing public education as well as, just Iowa in general, and it doesn't serve us to, to digress into those sorts of conversations or those tactics. So we're sure hopeful that the tone changes, and we're confident that it will. On a different note, on January 22nd, we had the League of Women Voters from Johnson County's Education Forum. It has been moved to a virtual format. And so don't go to City Hall. No one will be there. I appreciate that about the league. They were very responsive when we asked some questions about the health and safety of the community. Obviously, we know we have the variant that's spreading, so we also urge everyone who has not yet been vaccinated, who is eligible, to seriously consider that. We urge you to be vaccinated, to get your booster shots. It's going to take a renewed community effort to maintain all the programming that we do in our schools. And I thank Matt and Chase and Amy for all of the collaboration this past week on different strategies. I think I would say probably a few steps ahead of most districts with some of the things that you'll see, and I really appreciate that they involved the association every step of the way. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Brady. All right, next item up is our community comment, and a reminder that you will have 4 minutes, and you should be able to see your time on the screens to help you keep track of that. And make sure that you're at the podium and using the microphone so anybody watching can hear you. First up, we have Joseph Dobrian.
Joseph Dobrian, 1015 2nd Avenue. This coming Monday, we celebrate one of the most influential Americans of the 20th century. I was not quite 7 years old when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech in 1963. I saw it on live TV. Even at that time, Americans knew that the March on Washington was a pivotal event in our history. One passage in that speech in particular has stayed in my mind. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Dr. King was not a perfect man, and I don't approve of everything he said or did, but with that point, as a little boy, I agreed. Today, as an old man, I still agree. Color, as in race, means not a damn thing. It should not mean a damn thing. It horrifies me that I even have to say this. Today, in some circles, you'll be called racist if you assert that only a person's character should matter. It's technically true that critical race theory is not being taught in K-12 schools. But an inevitable product of critical race theory, what I call critical racism training, is certainly being imposed comprehensively and unrelentingly. Dr. King would be revolted by what our children are being taught about race in government schools today. You know who thought race was important? The Ku Klux Klan thought race was important. The Nazis thought race was important. Can anyone point me to a time where the people who advocated identity politics, racial essentialism, indoctrination of children along racial lines, and the use of government authority to perpetuate that indoctrination were the good guys? And yet we are told by the progressives and the social justice warriors who control academia today that it's racist to claim that color doesn't matter. Now, whether the book of Genesis is truth or allegory, it exists to teach us lessons. What color was Adam? We don't know. We don't know because it doesn't matter. What color is God? That question is absurd. The idea that anyone should be privileged or attainted with historical guilt or assumed inferior as a function of his race violates the deepest of Christian principles, that man was made in the image of God. Why do I have to point this out? In my childhood, no one who was generally considered decent would have said that race mattered. No one. Parents and students in this district must stand up to oppose this evil idea. Those of you who support this evil, repent. Repent as the martyred Dr. King would urge you to do. I ask this in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
All right, next up, just have Noah.
Okay, hello. Joseph, you're dumb. That's really all I have to say. You're ignorant. Well, I don't know why
Please
you show up
address
to
the
every
board with your
meeting
comments.
about to like spout your ignorance. I'm just saying, what?
Please address the board with your
Oh, I'm
comments.
just letting the white nationalist know that he's a white nationalist and he should keep his mouth shut.
I'm not, you're a liar.
Oh, go write another crappy book.
Address the board with your comments.
Okay, so here's an email I sent to y'all about hybrid emails that I was mostly ignored. Thank you, Jane, for being the one board member to respond to me. JP, I'm really surprised you didn't respond to me again. Like, you are familiar with me, I assume. You should be. So yeah, I do expect a response, specifically from you. Okay, so hybrid meetings now. 1. Why is this board being reckless as well as wildly ableist in the midst of a worsening pandemic by not having hybrid meetings? And when will this be fixed? I don't want to hear excuses about costs or it's not. You can afford to do that. You should be doing that. We are in a worsening pandemic. There is no good reason to not have accessible meetings. People should not come here. Should not have to be forced to physically come to these meetings to risk their safety to speak at said meetings. And it's not just a safety thing for me, because I would have been here at previous meetings. I haven't been here for a few months now is because they're not accessible. I would have been able to attend and participate in these meetings past several months, but since they aren't hybrid, they aren't accessible, because of the accessibility issue, that's not even related to the pandemic, is I haven't been able to attend these meetings. I'm just like, there's a whole bunch of reasons why they need to be accessible. The pandemic just is what makes it so much worse as it currently is not accessible. That just makes the pandemic worsens everything, as we all know. So yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about. All right, thanks.
Next up, Corey Hotka.
All right, I'm Corey Hotka, born and raised Iowa City. Some of you might know me. I know Matt knows me very well. I'm sure he's happy to see me here addressing you instead of him in this manner. And I am addressing the mask mandates on our children. And I'm going to be the voice for them since they have no one to defend them. I've written to express my serious concerns over ICCSD Corona District mandatory mask policy, and it is my application to my kids as a condition of my enrollment. This correspondence is intended to enforce my children's rights. It also should trigger your duties too, on behalf of them. Implementation of the forced masking policy and its application to my child is a condition of enrollment. Without my consent is a violation of my child's rights. Our children still have rights. Mandates don't. Anyway, I'm going to stay focused. I hereby place you all on notice that I'm making a formal complaint, and I have submitted this to Matt with his name on it, to all of you, that I hereby demand that you immediately tender the correspondence of the affidavit of the insurance carriers and your in-house legal counsel and authorized representatives. I have much more to say, but not enough time to say it, so I'm going to get to the point. I understand that the right of informed consent to medical intervention has been recognized by law in the United States since 1914. Nuremberg Code, if you haven't ever heard of it, look it up, read it. It's a suggestion. I know some of you have, so I'm not trying to insult anyone here. In the event of my child should sustain physical, respiratory, pulmonary, autoimmune, neurological, psychiatric, any kind of damage due to your policy or injury reported to I want it reported to your general or commercial liability insurance carrier or other appropriate insurance as a compensatable claim, regardless of whether the manifestation onset occurs with detected while my child is actively engaged in studies on this campus or not. So we're getting to the bottom line. You took the rights of the children. They have no rights. They got no voice, and you bully them. You're bullying little kids, and I see it. I see a little girl that was hungry, too small clothes, didn't have tennis shoes, was hungry, and she was ridiculed why she didn't have a mask on. I couldn't believe it. I almost cried for her. other kids in schools that are being forced to put on masks while teachers have them down and say, oh, I forgot to put it up. No, you didn't. They know as well as you know it doesn't work. It's not working. They can't enforce it. They're teachers. How the heck do you think that they're going to stop this? There's no stopping it. The only thing you're doing is crushing these kids is individuality, their spark, their light. They'll never know what freedom tastes like because of you. And I hope parents stand up to this, and I hope you all change your mind and reverse this mandate. Thank you very much.
Hear, hear.
That's the last of our community comments, so we can move into our regular agenda. And the first item up is the approval of tonight's agenda.
I move approval of the agenda for tonight.
Second.
All right. Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, that moves us into the consent agenda. Were there any questions from directors as they reviewed the bills that they wanted to bring up? Are there any items directors would like to pull from consent? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you, Kim. That moves us down to our public hearings, and it is time for Director Williams to shine.
Thanks, Director Eystone. Hopefully I don't mess this up. Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2022 City High CTE Classroom Remodel Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on December 14th, 2021. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on December 15th, 2021. The district will receive bids on this project at 1:30 p.m. January 27th, 2022 at the facilities office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on December 15th, 2021. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing and move on to our second one. Director Williams.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed conveyance of 3.79 acres at Christine Grant Elementary to the City of North Liberty, with legal descriptions provided in the attached documentation to the City of Iowa City. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on December 27th, 2021. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we will close that public hearing. Thank you very much. Move down to our presentation, our annual enrollment demographics and class size report. It looks like Amy's getting ready over there.
Good evening, everyone. President Eystone and directors. Tonight I'll be presenting enrollment information, and this report provides historic trends since 1999 through this school year, and we've also included class size data from this past school year or current year. On pages 3 and then 33 to 35, we address certified enrollment in the district, and our certified enrollment this past year was 14,394.92 students, an increase of 111.12 students over the past year. The Department of Ed determines a formula that all districts in the state of Iowa use. It's based on the number of students present in each school district on October 1st. The number is a weighted value based on the way each student is categorized. The graph on page 3 gives a historic look at certified enrollment, while the breakdown of weightings and a comparison to last year can be found on pages 33 to 35. So I'm going to just kind of quickly scroll down there, and it gives a nice comparison with the weighted values between last school year and this school year. So you can see that when you scroll down then to page 35, this is where you can see that difference. Where it showed the 14,394.92 students in comparison to last year. Of course, last year was an anomaly, but we did at least enjoy a bump of 111.12 students. Certified enrollment is different than headcount, and headcount is the term that we use for our students in seats then. And if we go to page 5, you can see our headcount, and this is broken out by, of course, all 3 levels here. Our headcount number for this past year is 14,241 students. It's again broken down by elementary, junior, and high school. You can see that here we're just shy of the highest year on the graph, which was the 2019-2020 school year, where we realized a headcount of 14,276 students. Not quite rebounded to that level yet. Then over the next several pages, pages 6 through 16, we showcase a variety of demographics here, including information on race and ethnicity, free and reduced price lunch eligible students, English language learners, and special education eligible students. As far as race and ethnicity, our district continues to grow more diverse, and on pages 6 and 7, you're provided with the changes since the 1999-2000 school year. This school year, 55.4% of our students are white, with 44.6% being minority. It's a slight increase in white students, which we typically don't realize, and a slight decrease in our minority students compared to the previous year. But it is overall fairly comparative to what we were seeing during the 2019-2020 school year. This next page then really has a nice breakdown and a historic look for all of you. You can see the actual N and increase or decrease there. As far as our free and reduced price lunch eligible students, we've got several graphs in here found on pages 8 through 13. This year we're witnessing the highest percentage of students since 1999, with 39.1% of our students being eligible for free or reduced price lunch. The graphs provided for you depict free and reduced price lunch headcount, and headcount broken down by elementary, junior high, high school, and now our online program, annual changes in numbers, percentage by year, and then percentage by level. Again, you have the anomaly of last year that you're going to see in all of these graphs. Our English language learners then is the next set of demographics that we are sharing. This year we're enjoying the largest amount of ELs in our system with 1,841 students. This represents 12.9% of our student body, and we've hovered in this range of percentage for the past 4 years. And roughly around 12.9, 12.4, 12.5, 12.2%. The next several pages depict students receiving special education services. This year, the number of students served in the district is 1,396. This is very comparable to both the 2018-2019 and 2019-2020 school years. It represents 9.8% of our student body, and this has been fairly consistent for the last 3 years, the percentage. Then the report pivots to class sizes, and it starts first with secondary and then of course moves into our elementary RAM. With the secondary class sizes, this chart has a nice look on page 22 about the average class size by department, both the district average and then the average for each secondary school. And when we consider the departments, you can see that the industrial arts classes tend to have the smaller class sizes department-wise, while the PE and health tend to have the larger class sizes just on average across the district. We get into the next series of graphs, and they're done by building by secondary school on pages 23 through 30, and they show the frequency of the class size in each of the secondary schools. What's not represented there is the course names, and so you may have questions about both ends of the graphs when you see them. You know, what's happening on the low ends of these graphs when the student count isn't, you know, very high here for some of these sections, and then what's happening over here. And I can just tell you by and large that generally speaking, sections are smaller for electives and for higher level courses such as world languages 4 and 5 and AP classes. Those are the smaller classes, and then they're larger on this end typically for PE and health, like I mentioned earlier, and for music. And then this graph is regarding the elementary RAM, and this is what the landscape looked like on October 1st. So this was pulled on as of October 1st. The green columns on the green columns represent the actual FTE that were deployed at that time. As you know, we right-size our classrooms according to the weighted resource allocation model that sets aspirational goals for class sizes. It's now found in board policy 606.1. And in there, if you kind of pick through it with a fine-tooth comb, both Kirkwood, Alexander, Longfellow, Borlaug, and Shimmick all would show that technically on paper they were up an extra teacher, while Van Allen looked like it would have been calling for a teacher. Of course, every day our numbers change in the district, and we don't right-size classrooms every day. At the beginning of the year, we did right-size those classrooms right before the school year started, and then right around Labor Day, we made one more course correction, if you remember that. And then we've opened an enrollment period for second trimester, then again on January 3rd. We did not make any movement during the beginning of second trimester for elementary, made a slight course correction for January 3rd, where we're settled into our current enrollment model options for the remainder of this school year. And then we get back to the certified enrollment graphs showing last year and this year's weighted enrollment counts. And with that, I would take any questions.
Amy, it's a very well done report. I really congratulate you and the staff for making this available to us and to the community. I just wanted to note, or to see if my observations of the elementary school enrollment match what your thinking is. I think we have 371 sections in elementary schools.
Yeah.
Okay, by my rough count, I saw about 31 sections that have 25 or more, 25 to 30 students in those sections.
Mm-hmm.
So the remainder of the sections have less than 25 students in them. I personally think that's a great achievement on your part, on the staff part, and Les's part on financing, because we have fewer, smaller class sizes when we put more money into those purposes. So I just wanted to commend all of you for getting us to the point where we have class sizes that are, for elementary students at least, that are, at least for the emails that I've received anyway, are in the range that parents and teachers are looking for.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that feedback. And you know, it's a total team effort, right? Without the board policy, we couldn't put it in play. And each year, it's a challenge for us to think about what we can handle budget-wise. And while the board policy or aspirational goals for class sizes, you know, remains the same, we do have to do a little bit of jockeying about where buildings are placed based on what we can afford. So we certainly appreciate that feedback.
Amy, do we know why our students open enroll out of the district? Is there a common theme? Is there like an exit interview?
You know what? That's a great question. In the past, Lisa Mattingly, one of our assistants, will email families or survey families about their reasons. And a lot of times it's been to seek out different homeschooling options. Mid-Prairie tends to be a very popular one. I would say if you look at our statistics this year, we're pretty neutral, and the fact open enroll out and open enroll in is about even. We have a lot of families coming into our online program right now, so that's
Believe me, because y'all, send my paperwork.
so that's nice to see that we're in a neutral position there, Jane. I need to check with Lisa to see if we're still sending that survey out for our open enrolled out families.
I would just, oh geez, that was really loud tonight. Whoa, you got the volume going. Usually I have to lean all the way in. I would just echo what Amy said. That's a big change for us to get that number to move where it's been. So I think those are good questions, Jane. A lot of times we had problems with participation and getting that survey data back. To have it realized, Amy did a nice job of showing it was the Mid-Prairie, component. For an example, with the homeschool program, we tried to invest in our homeschool assistance program to do more of that. Liberty High School has been a big assistance for us in turning around some of that open enrollment with students leaving. So that gap has really narrowed for us. And the other thing I would say, what Amy was sharing with the class size part is that's your ESSER dollars at work, right? And so the thing we'll just have to remember as a team is as those ESSER dollars leave the system, we'll see some of those class sizes return to pre-COVID levels with that, looking at those secondary class sizes from doing that part of the report before and seeing where they ended up for us this year. You can tell those are the ESSER dollars impacting the classroom, which is a great thing for us for a lot of different reasons.
That's a really good point, Matt, and I would just remind the board and anybody else that's listening out here that last year we were settled into RAM levels 2 through 5. The RAM that you see in front of you has our buildings settled in RAMs 1 through 4, and like Matt said, through the ESSER dollars. So we didn't make that promise that we were going to be able to do that long term, though.
Yeah, I just have a question, because I know we used to see enrollment projections, and just kind of when's the last time we had an enrollment projection, and what are we looking at? Especially since we've made some boundary changes since then, and I just wonder kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question, JP. And the easy answer is we need new ones. And so next meeting, we'll be presenting you guys with a contract to do a new demographer study. I don't know if Adam wants to add anything to that, but he'll be putting that on the next board agenda so that we can do a new enrollment projections, basically the ones we've had prior to this. Wouldn't hold any water or any validity for us anymore. So we felt it was important to do that as we approach that second facility master plan. Adam, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I just have this will be on the agenda for the next board meeting, but real quick summary, we'll be doing actually 3 projections. One that'll culminate in the spring and April, and that'll just be a district-wide by-grade projection over the coming 10-year period. We give low, medium, high projections, and then a recommended projection. So that's the first. The second is during the summer, we'll get a student potential analysis, which really looks at land instead of historical enrollment. So it's able to anticipate needs in areas where historical enrollment would be helpful, like a brand new subdivision that's planned that hasn't started construction yet. So that would be the second. And then the third is the more traditional set of enrollment projections. If you look at previous ones in the district that are by grade, by school, that really help us look at those school level, classroom level target numbers that we expect over the coming 10 years.
Great. And then how often do we do that? Or would we want to be doing that at this point?
Question. Historically, we've done them every 2 years, and we generally did them in odd years. We opted not to do them last year, in large part at the recommendation of the demographer firm that we work with, because the pandemic created so much uncertainty that we weren't sure there'd be a whole lot of value in that. So we've done them on odd years. This year, we're kind of 1 year behind.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll ask a question. I thought, Mlk, you were going to jump in there. I noticed there's 3 schools that have a little star for ELL, and one has a little star for special ed. I don't know, do we not have numbers, or are there not kids there? And if there's not kids there in those services, is it because there's just not kids that qualified, or we don't have programs there? It's in the in the charts.
On the RAM, I'm not sure why that's happening.
Okay.
Maybe it's,
Because that's my question was, because I thought we had programs at all the schools.
We do have programs at all the schools.
Both
yeah.
special ed and ELL programs. Okay. So I think, yeah, Shimmick and Grant and Penn have it on ELL, and I think Lincoln has it on special ed. So that's why I was curious.
And Hills.
And Hills, okay.
Maybe their N is really low. I'd have to go back and check with Austin
Okay.
on that.
Yeah, that's almost certainly because the N is below what we would require because we allow for identification of individuals who are enrolled in those programs.
Okay.
Why are our special ed percentages dropping? Is that a difference in identification for services, or what's the reason for that?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, then I'll send it over to Lisa. But I think you asked, I didn't catch the beginning of it, but why are special ed numbers dropping?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and consistently, I think our percentage has been around 9.8, if I'm remembering right from the report from the last 3 years. I would say having stronger MTSS procedures in the district where we're serving students and so two things. We're differentiating instruction at the universal level, getting to more kids and their needs just universally. And then two, our interventions are working, right? So the additional reading or math interventions that we're offering and or behavior, because we know if behaviors can be settled, then kids are more apt to be learning. So I would say it's evidence of a stronger MTSS system being in place. Lisa, do you want to add anything?
No, I would, oh, sorry, mine's loud. No, I would say that is true. Our numbers do, they fluctuate with students just moving in, moving out, but the overall identification rate has been similar, which there have been some changes to entitlement over time. So in the last few years, some court cases, which have actually made the entitlement process just a little bit more flexible. So the fact that our entitlement rate hasn't gone up, I think, speaks to good work that's being done in the classroom.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's great. I also wondered are we able to get the numbers teased out, demographics for special ed as well as the junior highs and high schools in terms of demographics and FRL status?
Sure, we could do that.
Okay.
And just looking at the special ed eligible student percentages on page 20, I know making conclusions about data just by looking at a graph is a little hazardous, but it looks to me like over the last 7 years, since 2015 to 16, the percentage has been around 10%, and it hasn't changed very much over that period of time. Does that fit in with what you're seeing, Lisa, in terms of determining eligibility?
Yeah, I think for the past several years, I think it has gone or been fairly steady or stable at or even below the statewide average entitlement rate. So I think and dropped quite a bit from a historical rate of identification, in the district as a whole. So yeah, but over the past several years, it's remained pretty stable.
Thanks for pointing that out, Charlie. The
Sorry?
graph, thanks for pointing that out. The graph looks like this, but yeah, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, it is the same.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Other questions from directors? Something to add, Matt?
One thing I'd add, Sean, in response to Jane's kind of question there about breaking down demographics around that, there is federal monitoring of our special ed percentage to know if, to look for disproportionality on campuses in the district. So that is also federally monitored. So we can, of course, get those breakdowns, but just so you know, and then if the district comes back with a problem area in that sense, then there's coordinated early intervening service dollars that usually follow that to try to avoid that circumstance in the future. So we can get into a larger conversation about that at some other time, but just so you know, if there was something that was discrepant in one of those areas, there is a monitoring component to that too we could walk through.
Anything else? All right. My thanks to Amy and the team for putting it together. Let's go ahead and move on to our discussion items. First up is a health and safety update.
Sure, so I'm going to introduce it while Chase gets some items pulled up here, but I think what we wanted to spend the majority of the evening talking about in the health and safety update was really a staff shortage conversation. We know that subs and position fill rates have been difficult for us throughout the fall. That could be classroom teacher positions, that could be bus drivers, para educators, nutrition service staff. We're just seeing the workforce issue like any entity in society right now. But the sobering reality of Omicron and what we've heard from some of our health partners is that it'll significantly impact our workforce. And I think we're already seeing that this week with some different situations on campuses where we've had multiple absences from staff and really struggling in our ability to fill those and get school covered on a consistent basis. So some of the ideas that Chase is going to talk to you about that Brady mentioned in his opening comments that we worked with him and the whole team on here the last week and a half since we returned from break really starts with the philosophy of trying to keep our buildings open and operational through this next wave of the pandemic, that closure and cancellation is the last resort and the last thing we want to do. And so we're trying to do things to keep our buildings going and that students have a place to go. And so what's really going to limit our ability to do that is if we don't have enough staff to deliver an instructional program on one of those days. And so Chase will talk to you about some of those options. Really, there isn't a good option for food service staff or for bus drivers. If we're short one of those position groups, we would be looking at a closure or cancellation scenario. The information we're getting back from the Department of Education currently is that if we close on one of our campuses, that we lose the hours for the whole district. And so you'd also probably likely see us close the district in one of those scenarios if we had a problem with a building, because we couldn't have everybody else work a second day and afford any kind of a pay to ask those folks to come back a second opportunity. So we are still working through some clarifications on that, but Thomas Mays was pretty clear in his interpretation this afternoon about how that would be looked at and viewed. So just to keep that in the back of your mind too as we have this conversation, it would be likely, it may be a problem on one or two campuses, but it may lead to a district closure, so we could come back and recoup the days and hours if needed. So any questions on that before Chase digs into some of the solutions? Charlie, I see you might have one there.
Can you give us some insight into the state's thinking on why they're following that policy?
Well, without speculating, that's their current interpretation of the code. And so we've tried to send back some differing interpretations of that code. I know that we're still working in conjunction with Brady and ISE Legal on that. We have some other examples from opportunities in the state. Cedar Rapids Prairie had asbestos closure when we came back from break and had an elementary school closed. I'm not sure that's if they're seeing that as a comparable example, but I'm not sure their whole district would have lost hours for that day for that one campus. So that'll be some of the questions we continue to ask. I'm just letting you know the best information we have tonight is that if we would have to close a building, it doesn't really make sense, but for us to be able to sustain and be able to go back and recoup those hours, if we get short on hours, that we would have to do it for the district. Now, as long as we're over our 1080 hours, we're still fine, right? I canceled school twice last week, so we're down those hours, but we still have some cushion. But if we get under that 1080 part, that's when we're going to run into a problem.
Are you aware of any of our organizations, ISEA or IASB or anyone else who's talking to the Department of Ed to trying to highlight the issue and then have them maybe change some of their rules to adjust for this issue?
Yeah, well, we just started the conversation here recently, Lisa, and asked the question to the appropriate people to get the answer. But I know, I don't mean to speak for Brady, but I know we've been working with the Iowa State Education Association a little bit for them to also ask the question and get an answer. And we'll continue to work with our groups through the Association of School Boards and UEN as we get a little deeper into this. I just wanted you to know the playing field tonight. I don't think we're finished asking questions on that, but it does seem that their interpretation is going to be a little bit challenging for us to continue this.
And then one solution is what we had to do a couple years ago, which is extend the school day by 10 or 20
Yeah,
minutes.
could extend the school day. We could just make up days at the end of the year. Those would all be options we'd encounter. Maybe we'll have great weather and we won't have any closures and it'll be a non-issue, but those are all things we would entertain to get back some of that time. And again, that would be a collaborative effort with the team and the association about what the best approach to move that forward would be, have it become necessary.
Just so that our parents don't get worried that we'll be in school in July.
Yeah, not in
We
July.
have some other
Yeah,
options
that's not the
available.
plan. That's not the plan. Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Maybe you said it, Matt. If we had to close a school, they lose hours? Do we all lose hours?
Yeah, we all lose hours.
Nodding over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we close, say, Alexander Elementary because of a shortage of staff, that's really a loss of hours for the whole district. So we would need to, the whole district really would have to make up those hours.
So if we have to make them up, would we still have them all go to school? All the other schools that are not getting counted?
That's what I was saying. So we wouldn't probably want all of the other attendance centers to report that day, because we're going to then need to do an additional, this is assuming we're under the 1080 threshold. So if we dip under the 1080 threshold and I have to cancel at Alexander because of a staff shortage, I'm going to have to cancel the whole district, because we're going to have to make up that instructional day with the whole district. And I can't pay staff to come in 99% of our buildings for that day and a second day after the year. We'll be bankrupt. That's not a CFO term, that's a Matt term.
Yeah. I guess I'm just.
I know it doesn't.
Well,
it's difficult.
I'm dreading the feedback we'll get of "you're closing my school for no reason" kind of language, right? And I get it, right? If we have to make up the hours, we can't be paying people to work twice. Right.
So we're starting at the end of the worst case, right? That's the last thing we want to happen. And so what I wanted Chase to share with you tonight is really the work we've done to do everything we can to avoid that type of circumstance in our attendance centers. And the first thing I would just want to say is a big shout out to our teachers. I mean, you got to hear from some of our music staff here tonight, but to our teachers, to our paras, to our food service staff and our bus drivers, they're already doing their best. Our principals every single day filling in classrooms. People are already going above and beyond to fill these vacancies. And so it's been stressful on top of that as we re-norm kids back to school. There's still a pandemic they're worried about getting sick with, and they're covering for their colleagues on a consistent basis. So this has been a tremendous undertaking that shouldn't be overlooked. So some of these things that we're going to update you guys on here tonight, they're already doing. They've already done on a consistent basis. Some of it's streamlining and making it more efficient. But we also have to recognize they've employed the best solutions they know how already at the building level. So what else can we do from a district perspective to address this problem, knowing by all accounts it's going to get worse? We're going to have more people out. It's going to stretch our operation even further. And I don't think I'm sharing anything you don't know from looking at the news about what's ahead of us here. So maybe it's worst case scenario planning, we won't need it, but we feel like we'll be the best prepared we can be using some of these tools. So Chase.
Sure. Good evening. And to put a few numbers into context of what Matt just shared, we did some data polls about our absences over the last week, and then did some spot checking compared to the fall. And we had our highest level of absenteeism last week on the 5th, so our third day back, so it would have been on Wednesday, where we had over 13.2% of staff across the district out. In terms of teachers, it was almost 12% at 11.71%, and again, that's the highest day we've had all year. And why those are high, really one of the concerns that we probably haven't talked about enough, Matt alluded to it, is in our support staff and providing that support in our buildings. And we had over 20% of our paras out on that day. And so we have to look at it from more than just one perspective of one employee group. We have to look across various employee groups. And that talks to our staff being available in the classroom. Matt alluded to nutrition services, which presents a different set of challenges. On that same day, we had over 14% of our nutrition services staff out. Now, those are bleak numbers, but it goes to the other point that Matt just made. A huge kudos and shout out to our building staff who are doing great work. And while we're feeling that crunch, I mean, that's a high number of people that are out of the buildings, and our buildings are still making it work. And so as these plans we're putting in place, we are trying to keep that in mind. By comparison, in the fall, sorry, my computer went to sleep there for a second. Normally our employee absent numbers are somewhere in that 7 to 9%, so a couple of percentage points up. But even when you do that, we're talking a significant number of employees across our buildings. For our paras, it's more in that 11 and 12%, so 20 is a significant jump. This week, those numbers were back down a bit, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about terms of employees that are absent. And so what Matt was talking about for strategies is what we've worked on and this is in draft form, that's why you don't have it in your packet and why we're not sharing it, and thanks to Brady for his collaboration as we continue to refine this, is really looking at how are we going to address some of these critical shortages. And the first tier is building level flexibility.
Can you make that a little bit bigger, please?
See, Sean, now you asked me to do things and I... Right, what? Oh, yeah. See, it's just
I guess the
so-
"can you" was the operative
Exactly,
question.
right.
was
Not
no.
will you.
The answer
Can
was
you,
no,
like,
Sean.
physically, can you do this?
Thank you.
That's like one of those curveballs. I know I was going to be asked, and so you get there. But okay, so building level flexibility. Our buildings have been collaborating and doing some of these things all year long. Whether it's utilizing their building subs in a variety of positions, sharing building subs across our different buildings. We have emails on a daily basis where our principals are collaborating. Hey, do you have somebody that you can send me, or vice versa? Utilizing some of our staff that are in teaching positions outside of a classroom and shifting that around to provide those coverage. Of course, we think that all of our learning experiences are important for our students and that we believe in that robust, well-rounded curriculum, but we are talking about prioritizing keeping our buildings open. And so finding strategies that funnel our staff to those core classrooms and those grade level classrooms first, and then looking at some of our ancillary services. And as I said, these are some of the things that we've allowed our building principals to do so far this year in terms of the deployment of their staff, but also looking at combining classes, allowing for one teacher to oversee 2 groups of students to ensure that we provide that instructional support in those classrooms. Or going back to something we did last year when we had teachers that were out because they were a close contact or had COVID. If they were asymptomatic or felt like it, we would let them teach from their home if we could provide some sort of supervision in the classroom. I think it's maybe something more we talked about than we actually implemented, but it's one of those strategies that's grown out of the pandemic. Similar for the secondary, again, looking at deployment of our daily subs and our building subs, and utilization of our non-classroom building-based teachers to provide some additional instruction in those core areas. And the secondary principals really felt like these strategies are going to provide the support that they need, especially this ability to formulate larger group sections, almost like study halls, where the students can provide or pursue independent study in their courses. These are not long-term strategies. They're not things we want to put in place for weeks or months, something that we would be examining on a daily basis to just make sure that we can keep schools open and students learning. If we have to, and we have special ed and ELL, of course, we have services we need to provide in those areas. And as I said, this is still draft, so we're trying to balance all these different factors, but understand that we have to provide those direct services and figure out how do we do that to make sure that we meet those needs for those learners along with the rest of our students as we do this work. We are going to put a pause on professional development as we look at our leave usage. We do provide a substantial amount of leave for the continual growth of our educators, which we should do as an educational system. But right now in the middle of a pandemic, we want to curb that a little bit to make sure that we can keep our teachers in the classroom. And so taking a step back from that for this period and looking at, again, probably through spring break. Want to give that flexibility to our principals, so not saying you have to do these in this order. All our buildings are different. The resources that are available on the staff and who's there are a little bit different too. So want them to collaborate with each other, utilize these are the group of strategies to help them provide the best support for students that they can. Again, planning for worst case scenarios, so we know that might not always get us where we need to go. And so our second tier would be to deploy our release time certified staff positions here at the district office, TLC positions, our administrators into the schools to help provide that support, to provide instruction and leadership in our buildings. If we're utilizing everybody in our buildings in the classrooms, we need some support to keep the operations of the buildings available too. So our administrators here, happy to help out and help with that coverage as well. And then our third tier would be to make a move that would actually allow us to require teachers to teach beyond the current teaching load. It's down 3 tiers on purpose. It's not something we want to do. It's not something we take lightly. You know, our teachers are the backbone of what takes place in our schools, and we don't want to put any additional burden on them unless absolutely necessary. We have some language in the negotiated agreement. We want to respect that. We want to respect our teachers, that if this would happen, we would need to compensate them for that time. And so, again, nothing's final. It's an idea that we have, and again, going to, if we need to keep schools open and we have no other options, we believe we might have to call our teachers in to teach an extra section one day or to give up part of their prep time. But if they're going to do that, we want to make sure we compensate them for that. So we're working closely with Brady to see that we can stay as aligned with the negotiated agreement as we can. Also potentially do an MOU to make sure we outline that for how that would take place. And that's a lot, right? Those 3 tiers, that's a lot that we're going to ask individuals in our system to do to ensure that teaching and learning continues. But at some point, we might get to a situation where it's just not feasible. And that goes back to what Matt was talking to the board about in terms of if we exhaust those possibilities, or on the support side, lack of bus drivers. If half the food service team is out and we can't produce food, it's hard to produce lunch or breakfast for kiddos. And so there might be other factors that would also require us to do a temporary closing. But we're hopeful by the efforts we've already seen by our building-based staff and looking at how we can pitch in from a different perspective that we might be able to avoid that. And so this is our rough sketch of that plan again. We've started bouncing it off some folks internally, trying to put a lot of meat around the bones of this, but we're continuing to refine it and work on it in a way that balances both what we want to do to keep schools open, but understanding the limits of our teachers, our administrators, and our other support staff in the buildings and the good work that we're trying to do.
So Chase, thanks for your thinking on this. Do you think we can devise ways to increase the number of subs that are available coming into the buildings? So, basically, we don't have enough right now. We're encountering situations where we don't have enough people to staff classrooms. So can we increase the number of people that are available to staff classrooms?
Yes, we're working on that. We're onboarding more and more subs every week. You know, we didn't know the crisis was going to be to this level, but last year we talked to the board a little bit about how we went to what we called a building sub, and we put a building sub in every building to make those positions more attractive and to retain talent. We made those benefit eligible positions earlier this fall, and we actually added a second building sub to every building late this fall, again, to provide more subs. So Charlie, we are looking at that as well and looking at ways, okay, how do we incentivize more individuals that want to be subs? How do we retain them to get to do more work? So we are exploring those strategies as well. And those are long-term approaches that we think could pay off this year and into the future. This plan is because of what we're hearing about Omicron potentially hitting us in the next couple of weeks and really hitting us hard. And so what you're saying are things we're working on. Those are kind of our long-term strategies, and this would be kind of our triage short-term approach.
Yeah, that makes some sense to me anyway. I'm sure it's difficult for the teaching and para staff to operate under these conditions. I agree with you. Doing long-term subs makes sense. Anything we could do in the interim to get more subs in the buildings will also make sense to me.
Thank you.
So I think that that the people that put this plan into place, that you all did a good job, and that board members, I think, have to take on some of the responsibility of communicating to the community if any of these tiers are implemented, that it is a triage situation and that our administration realizes it's far from ideal. But I think that the admin can only do so much to provide that kind of support. I think during this especially difficult time with Omicron, I think the board members probably need to do what we can to communicate to people however your channels work. Including, for example, if we do end up with a tier where people are going to be upset. I mean, everyone's upset already because it's such a tough time. People are going to be upset if they have twice as many children in a room than before because we have half as many teachers. They're going to be upset if certain kinds of teaching or paras aren't available. I mean, that it'll be upsetting. And so I think the board will probably need to do some of that lifting of saying, man, we know, and geez, it's the best we can do, and our admin took it so seriously with the goal of just keeping our schools open. And I think, it won't satisfy everyone. Maybe some people will say, well, I don't think it's worth keeping the schools open. We've decided that it is, obviously. So I just want to say that as a board member, I appreciate that these are desperate times and desperate measures. And I think messaging is going to be important from your angle as far as what you call it. I see the title of the document. It's not up there anymore. It's okay. But, use the word triage. It is triage. I don't know that word works, but for the general public, I just don't know. But explaining to people desperate times, desperate measures, that we're doing the best we can to keep kids in school. And it's just going to be difficult. And when teachers have that additional burden that was described here, that's when I think board members need to reach out to PTOs and say, boy, this is going to be really hard for your teachers. What can we do, right? Like if the school allows food to be brought in or notes to be written or whatever it takes. This is a huge community effort, and our school district is doing a great job handling it, but it could get really, really hard. So I think, again, as board members, it's our job to make sure we're listening to that, paying attention to it, and seeing what we can do to reinforce the message we just received from you.
Thank you.
I liked how, the order that was in there, right? It was asking for more help before asking people to just do more, right? Because people are already kind of burnt out, right, with what they're doing, and so more bodies is going to be a lot better than just doing more. I do kind of want to respond to Maka's point and to kind of riff on what's our job here as a board. And I think it is to weigh the point, what is the tipping point where we'd be better off closing, right? If we're all of a sudden packing 50 kids into a room just because we have to, that's kind of counterintuitive to trying to stop a spread of a virus. If we're just breaking our staff because of the workload they're doing and numbers are still climbing, there's got to be a point where we're like, you know what, we got to shut it down, whether it's for a day or two, or we shut it down for a week and see if things get under control. I think that's what we have to try and figure out, because I agree that we should try and keep our kids in schools because that's where they're going to have the best chance of, growing and learning and being citizens and all the stuff that school offers. But at some point, it could get ugly. And if it's planned for the worst and hope for the best, I think our job is to figure out how to help you guys plan for the worst. On a side note of that, if I am planning for the worst and we do shut down for whatever reason, maybe we don't have enough staff or too many kids are out or whatever it is, would we allow, I can't say will we have because we can't speak for them, but would we allow BASP programs to operate out of our schools, that kind of stuff? Because I know that's come up in the past when we've shut down or gone online or all the other things that can go along with it, right, in this time frame. So that's something I would want to have in the plan, right, how we would handle that. I am probably Mr. Doom and Gloom right now, but I do think we need to be very careful in how we plan for the worst. I am encouraged by, I just pulled up our lovely dashboard and saw that the number of staff went down a couple days in a row, so that was nice. Students went back up, but there's still pretty high numbers, so there's a lot of worry inside me specifically as to how things are going to play out.
Do you think that when you said the thing about crowding classrooms, which I know everyone's thinking about, including the admin, do you think it should be removed from the tier? In other words, I mean, is there a number or is there a square footage? I don't know how we would do that.
Right? And not all of our classrooms are created the same either, right?
And I think the other thing we learned is with this particular variant, it's not about social distancing. you can't. So it's like, I mean, I don't know if it matters if I'm sitting this close to anybody. I think that, I mean, and I'm no scientist, so I really don't understand how that works. It sounds like it wouldn't matter how many kids are crowded into the room with this variant.
Except there'd be more potentially infected people.
That sounds like finite math, and
Okay.
I'm terrible at finite math.
I don't like the idea of 50
let me
people in a
clarify
classroom.
that. It wouldn't be necessarily taking the two classrooms that are next to each other and that have 28 kids and putting all those kids into one classroom.
Okay.
It would be finding larger multi-purpose spaces or larger spaces in the school to allow those students to be supervised and be provided instruction. Because you're right, we're not throwing our health and safety protocols, out the window in this scenario. So that is a good clarification, that we're not looking to cram students into a smaller space. It would be utilizing our larger spaces in some of our schools to provide for that supervision, as well as to maintain social distancing to the best we can. Right, that's been our mantra from the beginning. But sorry, I should have clarified that it wasn't just.
But it doesn't even always involve putting them all together, right? You might have two classrooms, kids stay in the classroom, the teacher floats between, and we provide supervision in there. So it's kind of a simplistic way to state the solution with really a lot of different options to it. I think the thing we wanted to try to impress upon you guys is that we've really vetted out a lot of different solutions, and basically if these solutions don't work, that's the closure period, right? That's the time when, if we've exhausted these steps, then we're out of options, right? Then that's when we've hit the wall to say, we don't really feel good about what else we could do next or would have to do next, and they didn't make the list, and there aren't going to be things we'd employ. So if we've worked through this, that's the reality scenario of that's the tipping point for when we would have to close.
Here's what I would say. I want to give the team maximum flexibility into what they can deploy, because I think what we see from what's coming is it does come in waves. And what I would hate to see is that the waves are spread out through the district. So say Penn goes through a wave, but none of the other schools are affected. If they don't have maximum flexibility to maybe put 3 third-grade classrooms in the gym for 3 days, then Penn shuts down and they shut the entire district down. Then Penn rebounds, and then it's Alexander's turn. And now they have to, and so I think because of the DOE rule that one building shuts us all down, I think the messaging that we need to really push is, you may have discomfort for 3 or 4 days, but your kids are at school, and the goal is to keep you at school instead of shutting school down for 3 straight weeks and have that last loss of learning gap. That's just my take on it. I also want to say I'm really excited to see Tier 2. I said already that this building is full of qualified administrators who have teaching certificates and that you guys can get out into these buildings and sub, and I think that's great.
I think that's a good solution too, and like Chase talked about, I think part of what our building administrators are struggling with, and something we even saw with the buses last week, was our buses. We haven't had enough drivers, and they sent everybody out to drive, and then we had some buses have problems, and there was nobody in the office to kind of mind the store per se, right, and communicate out problems to parents. And so that's the problem we're also trying to alleviate for our building principals. That part of their struggle is when they're out in classrooms on a consistent basis, who's providing oversight of those challenges and problems in the building. And so that's how we'd like to try to pair that together and try to work through some of these issues. The other thing I'd say is just going back to what the staff is already doing, right? A lot of these things on here you're maybe seeing or hearing about for the first time, but this has been their daily life. The covering the classes for their peers and colleagues, they're doing that consistently almost every day and picking up the slack. And so when we get to that part at the end of there about requiring them to do it and paying them, we're working with Brady on the messaging part of that to our staff too about how that is, because we don't want it to come off as, okay, well now we're going to allow, now we're going to compensate you because we're requiring. They've been doing it out of the goodness of their heart for their colleagues for a period of time and covering some of that. So that'll be an important one for us to go back and communicate to the staff, is also some acknowledgement for really the semester that's been so far. But it's a tremendously expensive option for us to employ, right? We can eat through that money in a hurry as far as what that would look like, paying folks to do that. But it's a reality where we've been and the other things we've tried that it's on there as a solution.
You know, I really want to point that out and how much I appreciate all of that. Right now, the most important thing is to keep our kids in school and to not have to close them down. Schools seem like, from everything I can tell, is they're one of the safest places to be. Like, that's not where the spread is happening, okay? So that's a key point. And here's the thing I really appreciate about this district and the way you folks are doing this. You have put yourselves on the line to go out to buildings, and most districts immediately, and Brady will back me up on this, they'd go right after prep time, and they wouldn't be paying people, and they wouldn't negotiate it. It would just happen. That's what normally is the first line of defense is, okay, prep's gone. Now you're covering for your colleagues without compensation, without talking to the association about it. And I just think it speaks volumes that you folks are willing to put yourselves before that. I just appreciate that. I think you have given us a whole lot of cushion between where we're at now and having to close schools. And I hope the way things work out, anything that happens, it is going to be very short term. That certainly we don't, go down a slippery slope where we get used to things being the norm, maybe other than getting you guys out into buildings. I just think there's some value to that beyond having to cover in a pandemic, just some value in getting out and being in buildings. So I really appreciate this plan. I know you're still working out the details, but the impetus and the impulse of this first blush, putting that on tier 3 and talking about compensation, I get it, because that's where we come in approving a big ticket item like that could be. And so it's just appreciated, kind of the approach we're taking, and that we're really considering our teachers and understanding if we want people to be able to teach in any condition, you got to have time to prep. You got to have time to put it together if you want to deliver quality education. So I just really appreciate the effort and the work on this.
I think that segues into the work the teachers have already done, and I'm so glad you keep acknowledging it, and the board wants to be sure we're acknowledging it too, instead of hearing what we hear on the news from the opening of the session in the legislature. It's just, I hope that our community, our teachers, know that this board and this administration is very concerned about them because they are on the front line. And this is a discussion about continuing to have them on the front line. And it sounds like you've had very good discussions with them. And that's just so important during this particular time with Omicron and with what's going on in our legislature. So that I'm glad that I am on a board that understands and believes in our teachers and with an administration that does the same.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other pieces of health and safety you want to cover?
Are you guys all done with this portion then?
I wasn't
Chase
sure
and
what
Matt?
Chase just asked me there, but I think we're done with the sub portion. The only thing I just wanted to draw your attention to, you've already seen it, we don't need to spend any time on it unless you have questions around it, would be the latest guidance that came to us from Johnson County Public Health that we pushed out around that. So if there's questions, we can certainly try to help answer those or filter through those. We've had some community members reach out with clarifying questions, staff, nurses. Jess is also here, so if there's any questions on that, we're happy to answer them, but that's attached to your agenda there tonight. You saw our communications as those came out. The last thing I'll say, and then open it up for questions, would be we still don't have any information on the mask requirement lawsuit and where that stands. So no news there. Probably grateful that we don't have any news because we feel like we're able to continue some of our mitigation practices longer as we go along. So.
I just have a couple questions,
Sure.
clarifying questions about the 5-day isolation. So I sense that we're kind of communicating that maybe loosely, maybe not accurately, because the first day is day 0, and then it's day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you really don't come back until day 7. And I know that some communication I received from my my student's principal didn't really state it that way. And I think when we're cutting the isolation period in half like that, that extra day really is important. And does that make sense? So day 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually 6 days. And then just the importance of correct and consistent masking when they come back. So I have some questions surrounding that, such as where are these students going to eat lunch? Will they participate in band and athletics? What happens on days 7 through 10 then?
Jason, Jess, do you guys want to take those first?
So we'll follow up on those pieces about in terms of how that count is. I mean, part of our communication to the buildings and to the community was, sharing that guidance from Johnson County Public Health. And so we're trying to stay closely aligned to exactly what they say and how we count those days as I look at that and what we attach tonight. And so that's good feedback. And so we can take it back and make sure that we're working with our nurses and that when we are talking to students about exclusions, that they have an understanding of what those days are. There's just been so many changes, and so I think there's a lot of confusion around those, and so it's good to know that we're getting that feedback, that with this latest change, we still have that, and so we'll work on that piece. In terms of when they return and the mask requirement, we have our mask requirement, so students are required to wear masks in school, and I know there's some debate about the CDC says you have to wear a mask. Well, you can't wear a mask while you're eating lunch. Well, the guidance we're going off is what the CDC put out for K-12 organizations, and the CDC knows that we serve lunch, and so our reasonable interpretation is that is included with their thinking, and so that if they wanted us to do something different or they didn't expect us to do that, that would have been in the guidance because of the fact that this wasn't general guidance that came out. This was their specific guidance to K-12 that said it was okay for students to come back after 5 days. And so we can check with Johnson County Public Health if they have a different take on that, because we've heard that question too around the lunch. But all along, we've tried to stay aligned to either CDC, Johnson County Public Health, or both if they're aligned as well. And so we do believe that we are within the guidance that they have given us. Your question on athletics is also one that we've heard, and we haven't updated our athletic specific guidance, I don't believe, since the start of the school year, and the guidance at that time was that our expectation was that students were to wear masks unless they were in competition, and we are going to continue to go with that. And so if you come back after 5 days, the expectation is in extracurricular activities that you would wear a mask. I think the only exceptions for that, just correct me if I'm wrong, are swimming and wrestling because of the choking hazard that it could create. But we did construct a carve out that when they're actually competing, not practicing, that they didn't have to wear a mask. And we are not planning to change that requirement even with this new guidance. That we think there is a balance that we have to strike, and so that we will remind ADs and coaches that they need to be worn in practice and in non-competition settings. But if you're on the mat wrestling or if you're in competing, we are going to continue to provide that flexibility not to wear a mask. Was there another question in there?
I didn't, but I thought of another one, and
Okay.
I'm just wondering if there's any talk about limiting the number of spectators.
I can take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think the reason you saw most of our efforts focus on this, and it's kind of where I started with the sobering news around this, that we certainly could limit spectators. From our additional conversations with some of our UIHC partners and Johnson County Public Health, they weren't giving great assurances that was really going to make a significant impact, that student and adult behavior, almost to what JP was sharing, outside of the school day isn't changing. People aren't changing their behavior. They're not doing different things. The spread is happening. That we can do those things. And I hesitate to say they would just be feel-good measures because they would probably have an impact for somebody. But the ability to really slow or mitigate the virus, as we dug into that one, they didn't feel that those were necessary or even effective steps we would take. Depending on the event, it could be a super crowded one, but if you go to, it's that same thing we talked about before with some of the mask requirement, trying to enforce it with our kids. When they go to the grocery store, when they go to Carver Hawkeye Arena, people aren't doing it and they're not changing their behavior. So is there an impact that's going to have there to effectively mitigate the virus? I'm not sure we felt those assurances were strong enough to necessarily bring you a recommendation to do that this evening. Of course, you know, if you guys had different feedback for us, we'd certainly take that and go work through some changes, but that wasn't something we were bringing you tonight.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I feel like if it doesn't end up on philosophy exams, these questions, seriously, like about what do you do? It's the categorical imperative, right? It's Kant's categorical imperative about if one person does it and shouldn't, then no one should do it. There's really, it's a complicated situation for us to figure out. And I don't know what I think about it either, Jane. I have the same questions. Because if I want to go to a game right now, it's too crowded to go, and people aren't wearing masks. I mean, we have a little bit more mask wearing, actually, recently at our sport events, but, you know, there's still a percentage of people not wearing them. And so if I choose to go, I am choosing to expose myself to this variant, because otherwise we aren't choosing to be exposed. My kids have to go to school, and we are so lucky to get to go to school. So that's not a choice for us. We are going because, you know, it's necessary.
Can I just iterate that a little bit?
Sure.
So if you read that guidance closely, and one thing they continue to, and I'm really trying not to be difficult, but they're saying even with mask wearing, you need to assume exposure every time you leave your home with this virus, right? So that's where I just key back to, is it worth our time, energy, effort to limit spectators at these events? I mean, when we're saying things is, when the FDA today, this afternoon, is saying everyone should assume they're going to get it, every time you leave your home, you should assume an exposure, we have to think about how we keep our school buildings open. So that was the area of our focus today. I still think it's worth having the conversation, obviously, but I think it's reframed with this new strain of the virus is what we're talking about. Typical mitigation efforts are not effective.
And I think what bears importance that no one said tonight is the best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated and boosted. And all of our students and teachers and staff have the ability to do that. And so at some point, we have to ask our families and our staff and our teachers to go get vaccinated and boosted, because that's what they need to do to protect themselves from serious injury and hospitalization. That's the best thing that they can do.
So Lisa, I'm glad you brought that up, and that continues to be a focal point of our messaging about getting the vaccine and getting boosted. But we've also been in conversation with Johnson County and Visiting Nurses Association, and we will be hosting 2 booster clinics the last week of January in our sites. We're still working with visiting nurses about the exact dates and the locations. They just say from capacity they can't do 10 like they did for our littles, which was awesome of them, but that we will provide 2 booster clinics that will be open. And so we'll be putting out more information to our community later this week, or at the latest early next week, about those dates, about those times. I think they're going to do a sign up, but they're also going to take walk-ins. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't have that in my notes to bring up, but that we are kind of trying to do our part to make the booster available to our families as well as we move forward. So we're excited about that development as well.
Speaking of clinics, how is the Nomi test site at Liberty going?
It's good. It's up and running. Kristen's been doing a lot of the legwork on that for us.
Yeah, they are up and running they did a soft open on Friday, and then we're up and running as of yesterday. And I was just told just this evening that they did 100 tests yesterday, which I guess is really high for a site that's just opened, so.
And then my understanding is somebody that shows up can have a choice between a rapid test and a PCR. Is the PCR the nasal swab?
They're both nasal swabs, it's just where they, yeah.
And then the rapid, they can wait and get their results, or the PCR, they'll get notified 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, they don't have you wait to get the rapid results. They text you and email it to you within 15 to 30 minutes is what we've heard so far.
That's great.
Yeah.
And who has access to that?
To the results?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody in the public.
So anybody can show up.
Yep.
And so maybe you guys said, are we piloting this, and then maybe we'll an opportunity to have more in other parts of the community?
You can go ahead
Sure.
if you'd like. Yeah.
So our original agreement with them was to do 3 sites. They wanted to start with one. They're having staffing challenges just like everyone else, and this is their first site in eastern Iowa, so getting the equipment here. We went with Liberty because it had the largest footprint for where to set things up. And so we still have plans in the works to open a site at Northwest and also Southeast. So we'd have one in each kind of area of the school district, and we will continue to put out more and more information to our community about the ability and the accessibility as those sites come online. Do we have a date on?
So tomorrow is actually when we're going to be pushing out the press release, the more official informative information to families, because they just wanted to do that kind of soft open. So we embedded some information in that health and safety message that went out. Gosh, when did that go out? Friday? Or yeah, I lose track of when things have gone out. But so we'll be doing the more official push. They've ran into a couple snags, had some issues with the generator yesterday, but I think everything is up and running and good to go now. So
And then people can make appointments online?
correct.
They sign up for an appointment slot, and then maybe some paperwork or an online form to fill out, and then show up, get your test.
Correct.
Get out.
Select a time, but they also, if you don't have access to technology or don't have the ability to do it online, you can just walk up and register on site as well.
Great.
You can, is that what you said?
Yes, you can.
Good job pushing the vaccination language at messaging. I think you've done a great job with it. I think it has an impact. I think, again, the board can take it upon itself to also message through its own channels about the districts encouraging everyone to get vaccinated and boosted.
And I think it's not hurting to encourage the mask wearing at Hy-Vee, at Shields, at Carver Hawkeye Arena, because right, it blocks water droplets, and so it's just important, vaccinating, masking, and now that we can test, it's really exciting because obviously we all know it's not as easy as it was to run out to Walmart and pick it up because it's really hard. So now we have more access for our folks. So.
Yeah, and maybe I should clarify a little bit of what I was talking about before. With the traditional measures not working, I think that what they're telling us is where do you want to spend your time, right? And what battles can you still fight with this? What conversations can you still have? What are going to make the measures? We know we still have a mask requirement in place, right? We know it still slows the spread. Is the virus more contagious? All of those things. I think we're all up to date on the news around that, right? So there's things we're going to do to continue to be responsible and to continue to try to protect ourselves and others. But some of these other ones, that's what I was just trying to communicate, is I'm not sure it's worth the other impact of some of the other conversations that come along with it. When you look at our gyms and how full they are, and if you're going to limit folks or if you're going to limit music activities. So I hope that made sense. And we're definitely not in opposition to any of those things. If you want to talk about them further, I wasn't trying to, stunt that conversation. I think it was just a matter of where our focus has been. And if you guys think we need to revisit any of those, we're certainly welcome to. But to Lisa and then what the team was sharing here, I think the best thing we can continue to do is share the messages with folks about what they can do to protect themselves and to try to keep boosting that effort.
I think ADs can encourage students to wear masks. I know it's hard to get the parents to, but I think that just, at the events, I think just a little here and there reminder doesn't hurt.
And I think they are. I was at the city game Friday night and I saw Athletic Director Hansen come up to a group of students at least 3 or 4 times and keep telling them about putting their masks on or that they were going to have to leave. And so
they did.
it's a
They put 'em
constant.
on.
They did.
Yeah,
They
I'm
responded
just
and they
saying,
put
I
them
think
on.
That's
Yep.
a good thing. It's a good thing to keep on encouraging that at the activities.
And having our folks model, is going to be really impactful. So.
I want to thank Matt for the last statement you said, because before that, it was very fatalistic, right? Like, it doesn't matter what we do, we're all in trouble. Because then I consider the argument is, then why the hell are we wearing masks, right? And that bothered me to the core, right? Because I know that, and you guys all know it too, right? It's all about how many different layers of mitigation we put into place, right? That you've all seen the Swiss cheese bottle graphic at some point, right? What you said, why would we lessen the number of spectators? That's not going to do anything, right? That felt very much like we were throwing our hands in the air. So I appreciate you coming back with a little more context that made me feel a little bit better about things. But that's just where I'm at. It feels very daunting right now as to how bad it's gotten. at the same time when we're all just done with it, right? And so it's hard to message that just keep going forward, just keep pushing this. I think you used the swimming upstream, right?
Just keep swimming.
I do find it fascinating, I guess this is me personally, of how geographic it is. I happened to go to 2 different high Vs last weekend within about 15 minutes of each other because I forgot something. I would say 1 in 20 people had masks on. And the other one, it was about 1 in 20 people didn't have a mask. And just seeing that, I'm wondering, how are we not getting the same message or not receiving that message more globally? Sorry, I don't get it.
It's the philosophical issue, I think. It's so complicated.
Yeah, I don't know if it's messaging, it's just personal choice.
Yeah.
And people, I think people have heard the messages, but the choice they choose to make varies.
I'm getting kind of lost in the weeds now. Did you have something, Chase,
I just
you were
one
gonna
thing to
add?
circle back to what Jane was saying, but I also appreciate the comment that JP made earlier when we were talking about the staffing. I mean, if you look at our data, and you look at it compared to the county, schools remain to be some of the healthiest places for our students. And so, while we do have to make choices about where we spend our time, the efforts are definitely paying off, and I think we see that in our results. And so we appreciate the comments, and Jane, as we've been sitting here, we've made some of the updates that you were asking about. We looked at it, and the CDC updated that information after we sent our message last Friday. So while we've linked to it, we've gone back, we've now updated it on the website so it reflects that 0 day. And Jess reminded me that while we're doing, we're relying on JCPH a little bit more, our nurses are calling every single family where there is a positive student, and so they can talk them through that process about what those days mean. And so we'll make sure that we get the clarity around those days and around those counts and when we want to see our kiddos back in the building.
Great. I mean, this is very daunting, but it's going to get worse. It's not going to peak for a couple more weeks. Today, the VA announced we're not doing elective surgeries. We're pulling nurses from clinics to go to the floor. So things are getting dire, and I don't want to be responsible for a super spreader event, those types of things. So this is what informs my questions.
That makes sense, Jane. It's like so hard, and you just seen it here tonight in our conversation. It's so hard to strike that balance between realism and still trying to give people opportunities about what can you do to make a difference and where do we impact that, right? And so, I mean, we're even struggling in our conversation with you here this evening. So I think that's just part of the challenge. And just because this is a conversation tonight doesn't mean it'll be the same in 2 weeks either, right? The landscape could change, and we could have some different suggestions by the time we get to that point.
All right. Well, we have plenty of other heavy topics to get to, so shall we move on? All right. Next up, we have our equity update. Matt?
Sure. So with our equity update, I don't anticipate this one being as heavy this evening. We've spent a lot of time at our last few meetings talking about this, and really more we just wanted to provide a check-in around this. We're in the middle of our 2-lesson sequence. Laura and her team did an outstanding job with the training of the administrative team this afternoon on the next lesson around racial slurs and hate speech. And so the next plan is for them to take that to their staff and then delivery to the students for the following week after this one. And so we're in the middle of that sequence. We've talked to you before about trying to get clear on our board policy about where some of these hate speech items would fall, and it really would fall into basically 3 different categories for us: bullying and harassment, abusive language, and then we also need to include disruption for the event that should occur off the school campus for us to have any ability to deal with that, or if it does in fact cause a disruption to our school campus, even if it's on a student's private social media posted away from here, that it's really our lens into that. It would be the disruption that caused to the school environment. So we've been working to get clear and tight on that with our administrative team and get that coded into our discipline protocols and procedures effectively, and then we'll come back with specific notes around 503.1 for board policy to reflect that too. We've been working with the Equity Advisory Committee and the Equity Team about a district student group. I think I had provided that update last time about trying to develop some extension of the Equity Advisory Committee that would really be a student-based group that we meet with from the district. We were to engage the Liberty High BSU and West High BSU leaders yesterday, but we had a problem with our schedule and a safety concern about getting together in person, so we were going to try to do it via Zoom, and then we ended up just rescheduling it. So we do continue conversation with the students, and we'll continue the dialogue with them as well. And then the last one I've updated you guys on the last couple of times is a fourth component to the See Something, Say Something reporting tool, which is really a anonymous reporting tool, and we're trying to relaunch that, is the word Kristen used with me this week, which I liked a lot because it's a lot more than just putting a tool and some posters out to students. It's really remessaging that too, that there is a fourth component around there that students could report a racial discrimination concern, and that would be followed up in the same way. It gives them the ability to report it anonymously or with their name. But then the promotion or the messaging part that goes along with that points them towards Eric's office as Equity Employer Relations, or towards Laura for bullying and harassment of students, and then finally towards Janet as our ombuds also, that they could go there for resources. So trying to make sure students are aware of our processes and that they know how to advocate for that process to be followed and who to access for that process, and then also that if they have some hesitancy about actually reaching out individually, they still have a safe and supportive way they can report that as well. So those would be some of the big items I see as recurring, is when we went through that reevaluation of some of our equity action steps that we want to continue to talk about and make sure that we make progress on after those most recent events. The other 6 action steps I'm going to let Amy talk just a little bit super briefly about here with her team tonight, and then I think the plan that we'd like to do moving forward, and I think we also shared a little bit of this with you, is diving deeper into one of those items as we go forward, instead of just doing a flyby of all 6 items. And so after tonight, we'll come back with one of those 6 action steps that we spend a little bit more time talking to you about some of the progress and diving into a deeper conversation, so it's more than just an update about all 6. Okay? So Amy?
All right, thanks, Matt. So I'm going to take the PBIS and Rethinking School Discipline item along with Laura Daly and Kate Callahan, and then ask Nick and Brady to talk about social studies, Laura Daly again about professional development, and then Lisa Glenn around the Tate referral process. So as far as PBIS and Rethinking School Discipline, we've kind of broken that out into 3 prongs. You've heard us talk about it before with restorative practices, SCBH related items, and then care assessment. Laura Gray is not here with us tonight, and so she asked me to share that they are currently, with respect to restorative practices, reviewing the 10 schools that are scheduled this year to have the restorative justice work done. Brad Kelly has provided support to several schools in need of restorative justice intervention. And also they have the RJ ambassadors, which are stipend positions. So teachers with kind of extra duties there, working with the West High students for monthly check-in circles around race relations. Laura or Kate, who wants to go next?
I'll go. Okay. Trying to decide who's going to go next. Good evening, everyone. So as part of that Rethinking PBIS and Discipline work group that many of you are familiar with, a variety of action steps came out of that process. But just for a quick update tonight, one of the projects that we're continuing to work on or inching closer toward completion is the creation of a district behavior event chart that will contain a delineation between what are minor and major behaviors across the district. And in the past, just as a reminder, many of you know that the way our PBIS training had been conducted was that certainly existed so that we would know what the lower level intensity behaviors were and what the higher level intensity behaviors were considered. That's what a minor and a major are denoted as, but that was created by building, like building by building by building. So we would have 28, whatever it is, different sets of those types of minors and majors. So school A might make a different differentiation between all of that than the other schools. And so when you know better, you do better. That's one of the things through PBIS that has changed over time. And that's one of the things then that our action step kind of was a springboard from that process last year. Since then, we are, I think, on our 4th version, and that is just through a variety of input from different stakeholders, including principals, taking it back to that Rethinking Discipline and PBIS work group committee. We started off with some input from the different departments and people sitting around the table here as well, worked with our Grantwood AEA partners to kind of help us with the process. And just last week had input from the Equity Advisory Committee as well. And so if Amy's kind of nodding her head, I think we're getting closer to the completion. We've got a couple meetings set up to finalize that. So that will be a big, one of the outcomes that we had intended to roll out yet this year. And it was really timely because of the implementation of a new student information system with Infinite Campus. So we've been able to shore up just a lot of that. I know we talked about much of this at one of the board education committee meetings not too long ago, but that is one of the big pieces that have come out that it's certainly not the only thing that could impact our disproportionality, but it's one thing that could have a positive impact. And the continuation of that then would be to continue to embed more restorative practices as a response to behavior events. So that might be something that we have an update about in the future. Do you want me to just keep going with PD, or do you want me to pass it to Kate? So then for the professional development update 2, really continuing a lot of the work that the equity team started last year with professional development around culturally responsive teaching, cultural proficiency, and our social emotional behavioral team within our learning supports department just in January started the first series of classroom practices, PD, that focus on relationship building and are based from evidence-based research practices and strategies through PBIS. And so a lot of the PD that we provide sometimes is building by building, or we just don't have the opportunity as much as we want to provide common learning and language and strategies across the district as a whole. And so it was a really great opportunity for our team to be able to carry out the work that the equity team started last year and focus more on those classroom practices. And so we intended to have a series of 5 PDs, but one of the PDs fell on last Thursday when we didn't have school, and so we'll just kind of keep bumping it along. But as an indicator of some of the success, we did a pre-assessment at the beginning that we'll do a post-assessment at the end just to get feedback from everyone to see how relevant the learning was to them. But after our first session, we had 650 staff members respond, which is a pretty high response rate for the number of staff that attended. And on a scale of 1 to 5, 56% of the respondents said that they give us a 5 and said that it was really relevant to their daily work. 31% gave us a 4, 11% a 3, and then a couple people, 3 people gave us a 2 or a 1. But so we ended up, that's good feedback for us. We also had an open narrative section for them to just say, hey, not only just the rating, but what other suggestions or do you have for us? And I would say a highlight of that PD2 is we're, of course, using evidence-based strategies in the content, but then also we are using real examples from a variety of schools across the district. And so we're trying to lift up and highlight the great work that our teachers and our staff are doing, and to make that kind of be visible in a way that's very practical and that their peers and colleagues can take away. And again, really acknowledge the great work that so many of our staff are doing. It can be a little difficult over a webinar to kind of meet all that range of learners' needs, but this is just some foundational learning that we want to continue to build upon in future PD as well.
Okay, and I'll share a little bit of information with you on CARE assessment. And as you'll recall, CARE assessment is an initiative that came through a recommendation from the safety committee that was adopted by our school board in 2019. The purpose of care assessment is to prevent violence and resolve conflicts proactively, and it's a research-based approach that emphasizes early attention to problems such as bullying, teasing, harassment, any other forms of student conflict before they escalate into violent behavior. I'll highlight a little bit of our work just this past school year. We have implemented care assessment at all of the secondary schools. We have care assessment teams, and they have all been trained on the care assessment model, and that's sometimes referred to as CSTAG or the Virginia model or the Dewey Cornell model. CSTAG stands for Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, and we actually had a trainer from a Dewey Cornell trainer that came out and worked with all of our teams and our partners for a full 8-hour day. We developed a system through Infinite Campus to house the care assessment process, and what this allows is us to ensure there's a follow-through on the process to make sure that students are receiving the support that they need, and it also allows us to monitor program implementation and effectiveness. We're currently working to streamline the process to ensure clarity of roles, and as a part of this, we developed a flow chart, and it really outlines whose responsibility it is to initiate the process and what, what role does everybody play. But primarily, just to give you a brief overview, is when there is a concern that a student poses a threat to harm themselves or others, the principal will initiate the care assessment process. And their goal is really to determine if the threat is transient, so is it believed to be an expression of anger, rhetoric, humor, or frustration, or is it substantive? And so the most important distinction between transient and substantive threats is that the team would have to and must take protective action to make sure that the threat is not carried out if it's substantive. So when we do our job well, care assessment is really a proactive approach to really circumvent potential harm to oneself or to others. And the goal of the team is to get resources to students that are in need and connect them to supports.
Yeah, just a quick social studies update. Brady has been working with the team to continue on the adoption or looking at the social studies materials. Recently, we've got a group together to just review them closer and look. And Brady does a nice job of reminding us always to keep that inclusive and culturally diverse lens on the materials as we're working through that. So our group will be looking through those, and we'll just continue to be moving forward. So that way we have some new materials for the fall of 2022.
Okay, we're getting ready for the group meeting in which we entertain referrals for Tate for the third trimester, which will be happening on January 21st. We're adding some different members to that group referral process and kind of holding the meeting in a little bit different way. Also, the goal for the outcome of the meeting is a little bit different. We're trying to, of course, make sure that the right students get to, are able to access Tate. Students who are in the most need of a level of intervention in the area of academics, attendance, mental health, and behavior that can't be accessed at their buildings. But also students who are not going to be placed. That committee is going to be giving recommendations for interventions that could be possibly be ideas to be implemented back at their home buildings. So we're not just going to say, no, they're not going to be able to come to Tate, but we're going to say instead, here's some other things to potentially try. So, and those things will be based off of recommendations of things that are currently working in other places or even at Tate, and other uses of the resources that they currently have in their buildings. So we're just expanding the use of the current teams and expanding the use of the current resources that they already have. So that is the first step. Another thing we'll want to do in that meeting is to take a look at demographic information of the students that Tate currently has, and conditions under which the current students were placed. There are two ways that students are placed at Tate, through that ordinary referral process and through disciplinary referrals. So it's critical to understand who has been placed which way. So, you know, who has made their way through that ordinary referral process, and who are we, you know, who do we have ending up there as a result of discipline? But either way, students are not particularly successful, or they, you know, they've experienced some failure, or they probably wouldn't have a need for intervention as extreme as Tate. So the bottom line is they need more support, and that group will be just helping think of more supports.
The piece I'd add is just a quick update on Portrait of Educator. We had a conversation about that at last board meeting, and we continue to move forward. Brady and I sent out an invitation to about 50 of our educators last week and had an overwhelming response from those individuals. So we have those meetings set up to begin here in 2 weeks from yesterday, and then we'll continue through the end of February. So we'll be back with a more robust update after we conclude that process.
That concludes it for us, unless you guys have any questions on the equity updates there. Like I led off with, we'll try to do a little bit deeper conversation into some of those items as we move forward. Continue to talk about the race and racism work, but in particular the 6 action steps that we've been committed to and that we added on to this year. We'll dive into those as we go forward.
Okay, thanks, Matt, and the staff for a very good report. I would like to ask Matt, through Matt, and maybe you can refer to other people. One of the efforts that Assistant Superintendent Courtmeyer described was attaining some uniform definitions across minor and major offenses across the district. Can you comment on how attaining that goal would result in fewer disparities, racial and ethnic disparities in student discipline outcomes?
Sure, so I'll give you the easy answer and then let Amy provide in the details, but it basically reduces subjectivity. Charlie, is what the effort is to try to get consistent in the language and in the responses, that we reduce subjectivity and bias out of the system. So by doing that work, that's the goal. But Amy, anything you'd want to add on top of that?
I don't think so. I mean, that's an overarching goal. When we had 28 attendance centers kind of out there making their own rules, doing exactly what they were trained to do, there's nothing against what they were doing at that time, but clearly our data is going to be much more consistent if we are all working under the same rules.
There was one of the little classes or whatever at ISB, some school district was talking about that exact same thing. I think we were in there with you, Amy. It was like, yeah, that's what we're doing. But they showed that they had this wide range of people saying, well, it's this thing, or it's that thing, or the other thing. Well, they started defining it, like, this means this. And so this giant range just kind of funneled into a much smaller version. And then when it's this is what happens, right? Because that's the other piece to it, right? Like you define it, and then very specific what happens when that happens. And I think that was pretty interesting. And I was kind of in the moment when Amy was like, "Hey, that's what we're doing." I was very excited to hear because it seemed to be working for them, and I can't remember which district that was.
That was college community.
Oh, just up the road. That's right.
And they saw a decrease in disparities in the.
I think they were pretty early on in it, but they were having promising results early. But
yeah, I think the problem is if we can't define the behavior or agree on it, then our data doesn't mean anything, because it's all over the place, and we won't be able to identify which school might have an issue, because if they're all doing their own thing, their own way, then what does our data even mean? If somebody's suspending a kid for cussing and another school waits until they punch somebody, but both of those are a suspension, that doesn't, because, one thing we could do, right? We could just get rid of suspensions. Like, we could just ban them, but then we have no data, right? That's the easy answer. Just don't do it. but that doesn't say anything about the behavior, right? It doesn't tell us what's going on. And if we don't know what's really going on and we don't know how our adults are interpreting behavior, then our data won't mean it. Just none of our data even means anything because there's no consistency underlying. We have to know that on some level, and obviously there will always be subjectivity. You know, you can't define behavior like you can math, but I think we all have to have common language. We have to be able to use the same terminology. We have to teach our kids to use this terminology and to understand kind of what is bullying and harassment and what is a disruption. Whereas before, and it was even better because at least we had a DPP that was consistent. Prior to the DPP, there was literally there was no guidance. It was truly just principals just made it up, just based on how they felt in that moment with that kid. And then I think the problem is, as a decision-making body, if I don't have good data, whatever decision I make, I'm not going to understand how it impacts anything. If we can't all agree that, this is substantive. That violence is this, and we're not gonna say, some other minor thing that is a minor thing is a major thing just because you didn't grow up that way, or you think kids need to sit up straight, or whatever the loose definition was. I think before we really make changes, we have to be on the same page to understand what are we talking about. And mostly we have to give that tool to our administrators and our teachers, mostly our administrators, to have a playbook to work with that's been vetted, that's based in evidence, that's working on best practice. And then I think we'll be able to pinpoint where we maybe need to target our efforts. And what kind of target that needs to be as far as cultural competency training, as far as maybe targeting restorative practices. But right now, I don't feel our data tells us very much because the people who are deciding what goes into the data don't all agree on what is even a major and a minor behavior, let alone getting into the weeds on what is disruption and disrespect and things like that are very subjective.
So yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned the disrespect. So I think that the thing that the college community did was actually defining disrespect, insubordination, correct? So they got rid of that entire category, and they had consequences for specific words that were used or actions rather than the whole global vague category of defiant. Am I correct on that? Is that right? And now, but do we still have that category?
Yes, so I would just clarify. So the Department of Ed defines those, I believe, 33 behavior events. They also list those 33 behavior events. They go on to provide a definition. So those aren't two things that we want to change because we have to report, of course, our data to the Department of Ed. From there, so picture those being the first couple of columns in our chart. Then we identify what would be a minor behavior versus a major behavior. Right now, the way the chart is set up, we identify minor behaviors with the exception of a few categories, which the Department of Ed say, there's no such thing as a minor category for like a weapons offense or something like that, right? So there's automatically you move over to major. Within the major categories, some of them currently say office support, permissible or something like that versus office support required. So even in that major category, we're trying to define some of these majors can still be handled perhaps at the classroom level versus, it's pretty much an automatic that they need to go to the office. And so again, we've gone back to a small group of admins, PBIS and Rethinking School Discipline Group, and then last week, the Equity Advisory to get some more feedback. The one piece of feedback they were also asking about on the form is around disrespect and insubordination, defiance, because we know that our discipline data seems to be really out of whack, specifically for our Black and brown kids in those areas. Those are the most subjective areas. So how can we clean that up a little bit? You heard Matt talk about the category of disruption earlier, and when we've had these major events around hate speech and racial slurs recently, we can't take disruption off the table because that, if you think about ed law, material and substantial disruption for hate speech that's occurring outside the school day, we can't touch that unless it's coming into the school and causing that material and substantial disruption. So that's why we really believe that that category has to exist for not only hate speech, but another event that, caused disruption back in the buildings. I want to be real transparent about something. So college community had then another column next to all those behavior events, and that was what the action taken could be. The Department of Ed also lists a variety of actions that can be taken up to and including suspension and expulsion. What we've been consistent on back through the DPP work that happened with that group of stakeholders several years ago, which was trying to identifying through those 33 categories what could be suspendable. So we've done that work for some of those 33 categories. I think, granted, we'd love to do two things at once after we can get through this initial work. Yes, it would be awesome to have that column then of all those possible actions taken. The principals actually, have that laundry list and currently work through that. What I would like to see happen next is to go over to what that group determined was suspension worthy and reevaluate. A lot has happened over time. There's a lot of different ways that we can be looking at things. So for example, DINDD, that disrespect, disruption, was potentially suspension worthy. That doesn't need to be suspension worthy anymore, but I can't be the only one to say that. We need to have a team of stakeholders making those decisions. I would do that next and then go and maybe fill in the holes for the rest of the behaviors that are not suspension worthy. And this is getting maybe too long.
Excellent. No, thanks for clearing that up for me.
Yeah, I'm listening to this discussion, and JP, especially yours, and frankly, I'm not convinced. We have disparities in disciplinary outcomes. Many more black students are given office referrals because of the disrespectful behavior than white students. So even though the definition of disrespectful behavior is not consistent and it's too broad, blah, 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 blah. So what explains the racial difference?
Well, it's the students that are being referred, right? So it's happening at the front end of why are they being referred in the first place, right?
Yeah,
so
right. So why not just assume that they're being referred and deferred, referred, because the people making those decisions are making race-based decisions.
Yep. Hence the
It's just-
reason that
and
we're
it
trying
hasn't
to
got-
provide the professional development to our staff around cultural proficiency, cultural competency, differences in cultural expectations. That's been the real emphasis, in professional development in the last year and a half.
So the approach to eliminating disparities is cultural proficiency. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. That's certainly
That's what I would say, Charlie. I think it's a combination of both, right? Like what JP's saying is I don't think you can reduce the subjectivity and bias out of the equation until you have consistent language and until we're really comparing apples to apples. Otherwise, we're comparing apples to oranges across, and we don't know how much of that part that you just said is really related to the bias or to the subjectivity of the staff member that's referring the student. So we have to be tight on that so we know exactly the same language that whatever the behavior was, it's getting a similar outcome. And then the secondary or maybe the primary way, whichever way you want to look at it, what the problem is, okay, why is that behavior occurring in the first place? And that's the climate and culture concern. That's the cultural responsive teaching. That's the front end work about if we're having negative behavior and it's happening more often with something there, then what's the culture that's maybe presenting challenges to that student that we're seeing that?
Let me stop, interrupt you, Matt, I'm sorry. So I don't think the problem is that the student is doing things because of some cultural thing. I think the problem is that the student's being punished because the student is black.
I don't think that can be accounted for the whole problem, Charlie. I think that's part of it. I think it's complicated, and I think there's a lot of aspects to that problem, and I think that's why it's having to be attacked from multiple angles. I think to say that's the whole problem with the system, with the disproportionality, is too simplistic of an answer. There's more at play than just that. I think that's part of it, but I think part of what we're trying to tease out is what are all the different things that are impacting that disproportionality that's occurring.
Can I give the flip of it?
Go ahead,
So I think you're correct. Some of our kids are getting disciplined because they're black, but removing the subjectivity for me is essential to this working, because what I also think is happening is that there are a lot of teachers out there that don't go straight to discipline. right? They give second or third chances, they work through it, they don't refer, but they've got their implicit and unconscious bias at play. So are they giving second chances more to our white students than our students of color? Probably. So that could, so that could account for it. And then like Matt said, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. So if we remove the subjectivity and we say, if you tell a teacher to F off, teacher, this is what you have to do, then our data is going to get tightened up, because now we're going to see every instance of a teacher telling a student telling a teacher to F off, instead of just the ones that get reported because it's underreported for whatever reason, good, bad, unconscious, implicit. That's why I think step one, eliminate subjectivity, have a concrete procedure and policy that teachers and staff follow for when these incidents happen with well-defined terms and meanings, train the staff, and then let's see what our data looks like at that point in time.
Well, that's fine, that's a plan. It's always good to have a plan. And, I'm not gonna object to
Do you
that.
agree that it's a good plan, though? I mean, doesn't that make sense? They're talking about data
I'm not
collection
s-
and standards.
I'm frankly, I'm still not sure about the elements of the plan. I don't know, removing wide-ranging definitions of what's disrespect or effing off or whatever, that's good, that's
Yeah.
fine, okay, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not sure that's gonna get us to a lack of disparities in disciplinary outcomes, so. And
I think
don't
you're
feel
right in that standpoint, Charlie. That's not what's going to achieve the goal of reducing disproportionality, right? It's an end to ever get to that mean. I mean, you're never going to be able to do it if you don't do that. But at the same time, that's probably not going to be your biggest driver to do it. We have pretty consistent laws in this country that are stated and that say what the consequence should be. There's some variance if you want to compare those, but it doesn't necessarily reduce our disproportionality in that setting. And so if you wanted to, people compare that to schools all the time, well, you might have those clearly stated, but you're still having varying consequences and varying experiences. So it does have to work on the climate and culture end. And I think that's why we're investing in that part too. It's just that this also has to be cleaned up while we go along. And the district's done this before. That's the other thing I was going to add when we were having the private conversation. I mean, we referenced some of this when we were committing those action steps. The district did the Georgetown piece where law enforcement, the school district, juvenile court came together to be really consistent on these. This was another reevaluation point for us to know, as we looked at some of these PBIS and the majors, minors, that we still had further work to do on that, and that we could also do better. Amy did a nice job of talking about an example of disruption, one that could create great variability across and probably impact our structurally disadvantaged and black and brown kids more drastically. So I think those are all considerations, but you're right, just fixing that isn't going to fix disproportionality, right? We're probably still going to have disproportionate numbers even after that's cleaned up. And so if we're serious about fixing the problem, it has to be other work on top of that.
Yeah, good, and I agree with you on your summation there.
And I don't think we're waiting. It's not like we have to wait till that's over. I think we're working on multiple fronts all of the time. So restorative practices, right? That's something we're doing. And as we grow it and more people get used to it and they accept it, but you can't make somebody participate in a restorative practice. It doesn't work that way. So if a kid beats up another kid, you can't force that kid to participate, right? And so you might need other tools, but I think it's and both. That we have to work on cultural competency all along so that as we define our terms, we're also doing the work that does take a long time to change culture and to educate folks about culture.
I would just, I don't know, maybe it's the realist in me, Charlie. This makes it harder to pick on somebody more than somebody else, right? Whether it's conscious or unconscious, right? If I'm teaching a class and some kid in the back of the room is laughing at something and I've already had a bad day, or that kid pissed me off yesterday and I want to punish him, I could say he was disrespectful, right? Because it's wide open. But all of a sudden it's not wide open. You're like, well, was it disrespectful for this, or this? Well, no, right? It takes out that ability for a person in the moment to rationalize somebody into discipline because you already want to discipline them, right? They have to have met those guidelines. So whether it's conscious or unconscious, right, it makes it harder to do that. So that in and of itself is a step, right? But you're absolutely right. It is certainly not going to fix everything.
Good, thank you very much. Good discussion.
All right. And I look forward to taking some deeper dives into the individual things as we move forward. I think that'll be very good. Let's go ahead and move on to our next discussion item. We had some folks come at the last meeting talking about from the Be Smart campaign and kind of asking for a resolution from the board. They sent us an example. I know Director Williams kind of took a look and did some tweaking on it. I don't know where you wanted to start with this, Matt, if you just wanted to throw it out there and see what.
Yeah, I don't have much prepared for you on this one. We did get a draft resolution. I know a couple directors have seen that or taken a crack at what that could consider. We don't have a resolution here in front of you because I thought first it was important that we just have the conversation that if that's something the group wanted to do, or if there was enough of the group that wanted to consider that, we could put a resolution in front of you next time and kind of follow our policy process through that. So from my understanding of the Be Smart, there's a lot of information sharing that the district would be asked to do, a lot of communication in handbooks and through some of our communication channels that we would just want to make sure that information gets shared out. So I think it's really a conversation for you guys based on what you heard last time. Some of those directives would come from you directly to me to make sure that we would just implement inside the organization. So happy to answer any questions that we can, but I think it's really just for you guys. If this is something you want to continue to move forward, then we'll get a resolution in front of you next time and see what we can do to move it along.
Does anyone not want to move forward with it?
I would just, my one concern, right, is us telling you that you have to do something that you guys are not going to be able to deliver, right? Whatever it is, I'm going to freely admit I did not read everything.
Yeah, I don't think the bar
verbatim,
is very, and I'm not trying to minimize the work they're doing, but that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's a tremendous amount of work. I think it's really about communicating things in handbooks, messages to parents, district communications. Of course, we could probably choose to do more of that, but I think really what they were asking us to do, from when I looked through that resolution, it was really about a lot of communication. And so you'd have a chance to see that again when the resolution was put in front of you, and we could quickly get that to you at the next meeting to look at.
I think
It makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah, it seems like the next logical step, so.
Sure.
All right.
We'll have it ready for you.
All right, well, that was easy. All right, and we're gonna move on to our last discussion item, which will kind of come back around in our action items here. Just timing wise of this, the employee vaccination policy from OSHA. So I don't know how you want to start the discussion on it, but you will see later on some action items on policies there to go along with it.
Just laughing to myself because it's like we didn't get to talk about COVID enough. We thought we better put another item on to talk to you guys about it. But you do have the mandatory policy on employee vaccination there in front of you. I think we handled it at a policy and governance meeting the prior time that you would have seen it. And then we decided to delay it because OSHA had suspended the implementation on it. Recent news around it involves the Supreme Court hearing oral arguments on January 7th around it. Unless something got communicated tonight, I'm not aware of a decision that they've come back with on that. Iowa, of course, the governor has said that should not direct the Iowa wing of this to implement the policy. It's hard to know what will happen from that. Our legal counsel has advised us to move forward with adoption of the policy. And so you'll see that we also added in a sentence or two around if the Supreme Court would nullify the OSHA's ability to be able to do this, then of course the policy would become null and void. You wouldn't have to re-vote on it or to vote to rescind it. That would be covered in the language here. The other thing I'd want to just draw a note on is that there was some conversation when we had it in P&G about if a religious exemption could be included for the use of face coverings, or if the use of face coverings should be on the religious exemption form. Prior, we had not allowed religious exemptions for our face mask requirement, but since this would be federal rules, council's advised us we needed to include that on the religious accommodation form, that use of face coverings since they've stipulated for that, that then we would need to adjust for our staff accordingly. We wouldn't change our stance for students unless directed or had further conversation with you, but as, in terms of this employee policy, it does seem like the Supreme Court will get us a decision relatively quickly, so at least that's what we've kind of heard back channeled to us. So if we have conversation and vote on this tonight and get the action we need, it could be by the end of the week we know more, but this is where we're at this evening. Chase, anything you'd want to add?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, just keep,
Yeah.
right, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I feel this is sort of steps that we just have to take because of where we're currently sitting with the law, which may very well change tomorrow. Right?
Correct, and even OSHA itself has
Well,
said,
it's
hey,
not
look,
law, I
right
guess.
now, we're just looking for a good faith effort. And so by putting this policy on the board agenda tonight, by us collecting vaccine information from employees last week, we feel that we've more than met the spirit of what OSHA's asked us to do.
Yeah, because there was a date yesterday, right?
Yeah,
It
the
was-
10th was the date they were asking it targeted for, but like Chase said, that with the good faith effort of having a board meeting tonight, we felt we were in good shape.
Just out of curiosity, the weekly test, is that the rapid or the PCR?
OSHA's left that up to the individual determination, and there's a lot of things, if the Supreme Court doesn't knock it down, that I think OSHA needs to clarify, but they've also left to the districts from what type of testing to who pays for the testing. They're really just more about making sure that they are testing weekly and that we're collecting that data.
Any further conversation? All right, maybe we'll talk more when we get down to the action item. Let's move into the action items. We have a couple of SBRC things going out. I don't know if we want to take everything one at a time or we want to talk about multiple ones real quick, or do we need any background on them?
I don't really think you need any, I mean, we're happy to provide any additional background, and Les can answer those questions. Any of those SBRC items before you've had those presented to you guys. Before, we just talked about the employee vaccination policy, dropout prevention program applications, a yearly cycle, and then you have a disposal of real estate. So happy to answer any questions you have, but I don't think it would take a detailed overview from us.
All right, so let's just start with the first one with the dropout prevention. Are there any questions that directors need answered on that? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Do we need to move the whole paragraph? Is that?
I believe so.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yeah, we need to move the language, right, Leslie? Yeah.
Charlie.
Okay, I move that we approve the request to the School Budget Review Committee for modified supplemental amount and supplemental aid for the 2021-2022 Dropout Prevention Program for expenditures necessary to implement the 2021-2022 At-Risk and Dropout Prevention Program plan is approved by the Abbott City Community School District School Board. The total budget proposal of $6,889,275 is comprised of $5,166,956 for modified supplemental amount and supplemental aid, and $1,722,319 as a required match from district general funds.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
President Isom, before you vote, we need to modify the dates. It's actually the 22-23 dropout prevention application, because you've already approved the 21-22 in the current year that we're in. I missed this myself when I reviewed it with Diane, so I apologize for it.
All right, I think,
Roll forward those years.
Both references to the years need to be moved, need to be amended from 2021 to 2022, to 2022 to 2023, both references. So we can move to,
yeah, I think we need to, just as a point of order, I think we need to, the second and the motion to agree to retract that motion and just make another motion to reflect the change, because we read an official motion and it's wrong, so we just need the motioner and the seconder to agree to retract that motion.
Yep, I agree.
I agree.
And then I think, Charlie, you could just remake the motion subject to the edits of the years.
As amended.
And I make that motion.
And I second that motion.
All right, and then we're gonna stop talking about it. Kim?
Online voting is open.
I'm nothing if not a rule follower. If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, and we'll move on to the next one. Again, I would look to directors if they have any questions. Now's the time. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion for this one as well.
I move that we recommend approval of the application of modified supplemental amount of $897,258 for first-year staffing of ICCSD Online PK-12 program of $897,258.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right. Number 3, same story. Anybody has questions, ask them. If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the application to the School Budget Review Committee for modified supplemental amount for abatement of environmental hazards of $918,593.
Second?
Any conversation? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. Number 4 is the OSHA mandatory policy. You'll see there's a whole bunch of them there, but it's forms and individual pieces, but it was all summed up previously. So I would entertain a motion to approve them all.
I move to approve the employee vaccination policies as presented.
Second.
Any further conversation? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open.
There it is.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And one final one on our disposal of real estate that we had our public hearing on earlier, I believe. I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the disposition of 3.79 acres at Christian Grant Elementary to the City of North Liberty.
Second.
Any questions? All right, Kim, ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you, Kim. Got to our upcoming events. We have our legislative update, and I think Matt was going to give us a little bit of an update from our forum. Attached on there is our priorities brochure that we had last year, and I kind of mentioned this to Matt the other day because of the things that are already coming out of Des Moines. Everything that's in that brochure is still completely valid because, they haven't done anything for us in years. But I just sort of floated it out there. How intentional do we need to be to fight some of the insanity things that are coming out already from the first week in Des Moines? I'm particularly thinking of how they're looking at, directly going after teachers and the books and everything. I think everything that's in our brochure is accurate, right? We need money for all of those things, and it's all fair. I'm just kind of throwing it out there to have people think about, because I don't think we're going to rewrite a brochure tonight. But I'm wondering how much more intentional we should be, or if that fits even with our little brochure. But before everybody jumps in on that, I think Matt wanted to give us a little bit of an update from our forum. And
Yeah, I think we were all there, and not many other districts with the legislators, so it was kind of fun because it was just our group and them. But Representative Masher talked a little bit about some different ideas for how we could try to look at the student teaching experience and also the potential shortage that is upon us with educators. So that was an interesting conversation and one I think we'd like to continue to be a part of. You know, and then a lot of the other news isn't super uplifting, right? It doesn't look great it hasn't looked great for us for a long time on the funding aspect, but then I think as Sean was talking about here and Brady mentioned in some of his comments, just the direction and the nature and tone of the conversation's problematic. We've heard a lot of talk around a parent's bill of rights, and I don't know exactly what that means or what the implications are. I know titles in the library are another point of contention and conversation for this legislature. And then, you know, whatever the other opportunities they decide to look at for public education or things that could be potentially difficult for us. We know vouchers could continue to be a conversation. We saw charter schools the last legislative session. So I think that'll be more of the conversation. There's a sizable split there that, you know, Joe and Mary reinforced to us. And so their ability to make impact and make change is going to be somewhat compromised through that, according to their perspective. So, you know, without getting too political, I think that's the lay of the land. That's some of the points for the conversation. And I think Sean's point's a good one about what other type of priorities may some of that conversation drive for the district that we would want to get communicated outside of some of the regular funding, mental health asks, you know, some of those typical ones that have been on our brochure for the last few years.
You know, that whether we put this in our official legislative priorities, I think, you know, messaging is going to be important, that we, you know, we support, I don't know how we want to put it, academic freedom or, you know, teachers' ability to teach. And also, you know, just because these are legislative priorities, you know, both ISEA and IASB are going to weigh in on any kind of major thing that comes down the pike as far as education goes. And I feel really comfortable with those groups and the UEN, frankly, being there to kind of stand, you know, fight off anything bad and to promote anything that we can get through. I do think we have to be careful because some of these things there's no power to do anything about. And so sometimes I think, you know, do you poke the bear who has all of the power and you can't do anything to stop them and put a target on your back and make people come worse? You know, it doesn't mean we don't register or we don't support things, but you know, I don't know how far we want to go down. I think we want to message it. I think that we want to make it clear that we support our teachers and we support our libraries and we support our staff and that we're going to watch out for any of that. But yeah, again, I don't know how much time and effort we want to spend changing the brochure necessarily.
My only thought is I want the brochure to be as effective as the brochure can be. And what I'm not sure is what the most effective use of the brochure is. The pragmatist in me, I don't think it influences the people that control Des Moines. So is the work of the brochure to make our teachers and people in the community feel supported? In which case, you know, for example, I guess where I'm going with this, restoration of Chapter 20. That is a waste. I think all 7 of us, I don't like to speak for the board, but I think we'd all like to see Chapter 20 restored. That's not happening with this legislative session. Do we keep it there so that we continue to have the conversation and it continues to be out there that, hey, you guys took away Chapter 20 and that's devastating? Or do we pivot to something more timely, like the attack on the librarians and teachers staff that we're seeing coming from Des Moines? I don't know, because again, I want this to be as effective as possible. And so if ISEA were to see us take out Restore Chapter 20 and say that that's a blow to support of our teachers, then I don't want to remove that from our priorities, because I don't want them to think that we don't support that, but I want it to be effective.
Yeah, I agree. I guess on another thing on that, I think there are, you know, probably the general public doesn't not know what Chapter 20 is, or that it was gutted, or the impact it has. So that's why I can always appreciate putting the message out there. And I would feel the same way about supporting our teachers. And so if folks want to come up with language for that, then I mean, I want a message out that we have their back. And however we can do that effectively, I'm up for doing that.
Yeah, and maybe that's what we need to do is figure out how else we can get our message out. And if we leave the brochure fairly similar, I think we should at least look at our SSA number that we have in there. There's a specific number in there. Make sure that that's a number that we want. I'd pick a much bigger number if I thought I could get away with it.
We could make it reflective of the UEN one too, and then you guys could decide if you're okay with that or if you'd want to adjust it next time.
But Lisa, I think you're right. Like, I don't want it to be the kind of thing where, oh, let's jump on this new shiny thing and then forget at the core though, right? Like, chapter 20, like that is support and safety for our staff at its core, right? So that's important. And this very specific targeted thing that they're doing needs to be combated as well. And so, yeah, I don't know what the balance is there either.
Maybe the bullet point is support and recognize the importance of educators. And then under that is restoration of Chapter 20, repeal the House Bill 804, and no new, legislation targeting First Amendment speech. So that we cram everything under one, but the one is recognize and protect our teachers.
Yeah, I think that has some appeal to me, doing it that way.
Yeah, and certainly saying something like nothing that's going to further alienate teachers and exacerbate the teacher shortage. I mean, I think that's language that might speak to people. Like, if you make it harder for folks to do this job, they're not going to come here and do this job in the state. And
I think there's a good point coming from all of you, and that is, first of all, what is our audience for this brochure? Who are we really communicating with? And then, to your point, everyone should care about whether or not we have teachers that want to work here. And we're not going to, unless our legislator changes its tone. So I think there is a reason to tweak some of these messages upon hearing what we heard this week. But I also don't know exactly how this document is intended to work. I mean, I know nothing works to some extent right now with our legislature, but I do think we want to be careful about who is going to be receiving this from us. I don't want it to be, this is going to sound stupid, but I don't want it to be political. I want it to be meaningful. And when you talk about teachers and whether they're respected, that should be meaningful to everyone if you use the right language. So I would like just more thought or guidance, maybe during the committee meetings we have about that, or if you have any guidance about how this gets used.
I think a big use of it in the past was the actual in-person lobbying that would happen at the Capitol. So then this would be distributed to the folks that made the trip, and they had some talking points that they could work on with legislators, or for folks that would make different visits and trips handed out to those interested or that we thought would be effective folks to have the conversation with our elected officials with. So that's one of the main purposes around it. Again, we can bring back some suggestions on there. Like you said, I think it's what I'm hearing of themes are, we don't want to forget things, but we also want to be meaningful to the current situation. And so that gives Kristen and I some direction, I think, to work on how we can construct something else.
My theme is, let's not just talk to the same, I mean, when we do that thing, we just got the date on the.
Yeah, the little flyer came out.
Yeah.
It's like February 1st.
1st, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it'd be great if this does get sent around, because of how politics are working right now. Let's make it so when it gets handed to people that are used to throwing it away because it came from the ICCSD, instead maybe we can make a message that's more universal. That's what I mean by meaningful, not something that just immediately makes.
If the theme is teacher retention, it's proactive rather than reactive.
Right.
It changes the conversation.
Yeah, and there are other ways we can do that as well. I think that's how the efforts have to be tweaked a little bit, and we've been asking that for years, and I know you have too, and I didn't get good answers at our last meeting. But maybe this is the kind of thing where you can tweak it and make a tiny bit of difference. I'm obviously not very enthusiastic about it. Sorry.
It's 9 o'clock at night and we're all tired, but I use
It's also because we have a Handmaid's Tale situation.
Well,
in
yeah,
Des
I
Moines.
used the term fatalistic earlier when we were discussing COVID mitigations, and that's type of stuff, like, I am more angry in the last 2 years than I have ever been with our state legislature, right? And in the past, I'd see something and be like, well, that's dumb, and I would blow it off. And it's gotten to the point of just ridiculous, right? Of the things that are coming out, whether they've made it through and been passed or not, right? Just so many just attacks on human beings are coming out from our state legislature. And I don't want to just be like, well, let's make a pretty little flyer and it, sits on our website and doesn't do anything, right? Like, I feel that if we just stop fighting, they win.
And we just have to fight cleverly, that's my only point.
Well, and so instead of thinking this as a pretty little flyer that sits on the website, if we rethink the purpose of the flyer and we say we have voices in this community who often ask, how can we help with public education? And we say, well, here are advocacy pieces. And these aren't necessarily, supplemental state aid must be adequately and timely, right? Instead, it's we need to, focus on retaining the labor shortage in education. So it's teachers and staff and paras and nutrition service, but we need the legislature to work on that. And under that is, funding for appropriate pay for these positions,
Or just to keep up with inflation.
Yes,
right?
just to keep up with inflation.
Yeah. So,
But
yeah,
if we
I
can
hear what
message
you're
it-
saying there, right? I mean, it's like broadening that. And the other thought I had was, this also helps us tell our story to people we're trying to recruit into our district, right? To show that, okay, you might have heard about Iowa, but have you heard about Iowa City, right? And what do we believe in Iowa City and what are the things we're asking for? And it's another way we teach our values to those folks outside of the area that are looking at potentially being in our district. So it can become a communication tool too about what's important to us, even if we don't achieve, some of the things that are on there.
We are a destination district.
Somehow that got attributed to me. It's all Amy. So she deserves a credit. I saw that somewhere that somebody quoted, like they said, well, they heard Matt say that. I think it was one of our emails this week, and I wrote back and said, that's
was in the
actually
press-
Amy.
what
Amy
was
gets
in the
credit for
press
that one.
then? Where did I see that?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Good phrase.
Good job, Amy.
All right. So I think we have some direction there. We do have another legislative forum in 2 weeks from now.
I think, yeah, it's not this Friday. So
Is
I
it the
think it's
last
next
Friday of the month?
21st.
Is it the 21st? Okay.
I'll double
Well, that's
check.
just next Friday.
Yeah, the 21st, 4 o'clock.
Well, there you go.
And then the next day, you can do the Johnson County League of Women Voters Forum
All right.
Via Zoom.
via Zoom.
All right. We're all getting a little punchy now, so let's.
Just
try-
you, Sean.
Is it just me? Maybe it is. Let's try and wrap this up. Let's move on to our director liaison report. I don't know if there's anything anybody wanted to highlight there. You can all read.
I just want to compliment Matt again for appearing at the Black Voices Project. I think the meeting last night was particularly helpful for everyone. It was a very good discussion, very frank. And it was about racial issue, racial climate in our district. So I really appreciate your being there, as well as Eric and other staff members too.
That's right.
Anything else?
I just want to tell everybody that since the City High student update included mock trial, I want everyone to know that this year there are mock trial teams at Liberty and West and City. So
Very nice.
all three schools can tell you about their wonderful mock trial program.
I think that's great.
Very cool. All right, let's
Oh, gosh.
let's quickly run through our agenda setting. You can see that we have an Ed Committee meeting next week. Looks like we're at Southeast, and we're getting a Grow Your Own presentation. I'm very excited for that one. It's at 4:30, looks like. And I had mentioned earlier, we do have a P&G meeting the following Tuesday at 5. We're going to kind of cover the 300s, 400s. We decided that we're also going to enjoy not having a meeting on the fourth Tuesday of December, so we're taking on a couple of extra ones at the next one. And then we do have our regular board meeting. All the usual suspects. We do have one of the policy reviews to bring before the board. Looks like we're going to start kind of that budget process with assumptions and budget review stuff. And CAFR. Is there anything else that Matt, you or the team want to add on there, or directors want to make sure we get on that meeting?
We'll do my microphone's back off. We'll do our health and safety update again to check in where we're at, picking up some of the conversations we had tonight. We'll do an equity update with the deeper dive like we talked about as well. So we'll get those items loaded into the agenda. I know Les has been itching to give the CAFR for 2 months, so he'll be reared up and ready to go about that. And but otherwise, no, I don't have any items to add right now.
The Be Smart resolution?
Oh, yeah.
Just going to say
Oh,
that.
Resolution. Very good.
That'll be the other carryover. Yep.
Do we want to, I'm asking everybody here, do we want to have that in the discussion area and then also later in action items if we want to go ahead and take action on it? And then if we decide not to in the moment, we can table it, but do we want to have it in both places?
I think so. What the alternative would be not to.
It'd be to have it, to discuss it, to see it, and then vote on it.
Yeah, if we had any tweaks or anything, we'd want to, I don't know.
I mean, there's nothing to say if we have it in the action items that we could punt it if we didn't
Yeah.
feel like it was ready, but.
Sean mentioned, I put together a draft, but it's largely 99% based on what they handed us.
Yeah.
So we've all technically seen what the majority of the draft resolution is going to look like. So I think we could put it in both places. We can always pull it if something happens, but.
Okay,
I think it would be best to have it in both places and
sounds
Great.
good.
adopt it if we're ready.
Sounds good.
Any other things for the 25th? All right, it looks like no. That brings us to the end. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.